Hello there, Kansas City. Stephen St. John here with another episode of Hot Mic with SSJ. As always, we would love to thank our sponsors, Patrick Carter, kcfarmersagent.com. To get more information about Patrick Carter, you need to go local. Don't go with one of these fucking national people. They don't care about you. They don't care about Kansas City. Go with Patrick Carter, kcfarmersagent.com. And also, CBD American Shaman. Edibles, vapes, they got the flour, they got the cones, they got it all. They got the topical cream, they have the ointments, whatever you need at CBD American Shaman. We have our friend Todd Lebo sitting in with us, but most importantly, we have our special guest this week. I've been looking forward to having this gentleman on the podcast, as we have done in the past with some of our regular guests on Sports Radio 810. We do a little bit of an origin story and find out more about the person that you hear every week on the Border Patrol or on Sports Radio 810. And here we have from NFL Network and NFL.com, Jeff Chadiha. Jeff, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, man. The mic is definitely hot.
That's right.
F-bomb
right
out the gate in the
goddamn gun
promo.
show.
I told you.
What are you doing?
I told you we cuss
Can I
and
say
talk shit.
it? Can I say it? Fuck.
Yeah, that's right. I've been waiting for you. I've been waiting for you to say that in the microphone. And so, you've been, how long have you been a guest on my show? It's been years.
I know Larry Johnson was still playing for the Chiefs when I started coming on here.
Holy shit.
It's been.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
That's been a long time. LJ, he's gone down some different roads since then, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Different cat
That's
now,
one way
right.
to put it.
That's
You know what? He
exactly
was a different cat back then.
Right.
He
well,
was
yeah,
different.
right, but he got paid. And so let's talk about you first of all, and let's kind of give some background, and then we'll get into some stories.
I don't know all the
else.
answers to these questions we're going
Good.
to ask you, because I've talked to you about some things, but I don't know all this yet. So I'm excited about this. You're a mystery.
Right, and we're gonna
good to be
unlock
mystery.
some of this.
Not
right?
anymore.
Yeah.
It's
So-
all coming out today.
Where are you from? Where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
Ann Arbor, Michigan. Actually, outside of Ann Arbor, Michigan, Ypsilanti, Michigan, technically Superior Township is what we call it.
They call them
right?
townships
There's townships
up there.
in Michigan.
That's
so,
right.
But yeah, Ann Arbor, Michigan. That's where I grew up.
Okay, so and then did you stay there your whole childhood?
I did. Kind of it's pretty common now, but I went to school in public school through 8th grade. And so it was more of like a mix, like 55% black, 45% white school district. And then I went to a Catholic high school in Ann Arbor for high school.
What school was that? What's the name of that school?
Gabriel Richard, Father Gabriel Richard High School.
Okay, so were you a good athlete when you were a kid? You played a lot of sports?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I didn't start playing sports until I was 11. It's kind of strange because I have a son now, a 9-year-old son who's been playing sports since he was 6.
Yeah.
So it's really bizarre to see what that world is like because I had no experience with it in my own
Luckily
life.
for people our age, it wasn't like that. When we played rec league crap when we were 6, it was no big deal.
A lot of fucking
And
anger out there
it's
now.
just turned into all kinds of stuff.
It's wildly different. And so I actually got into sports when I was 11. I had maybe 4th grade and 5th grade. Some buddies were playing flag football and baseball. I started doing it.
So you got brothers and sisters?
I do. I have
older,
a
younger?
twin brother and a younger brother.
You have a twin brother. See, I didn't even know
You
that
didn't
right
know that?
there. I didn't know you had a twin brother.
Where's he at?
They're both in California. One is
Identical twins?
fraternal.
Fraternal.
Yeah, one is in Oakland. My younger brother's in Oakland, California. He's actually here right now visiting with my mom and myself.
Get him in here.
And my twin brother is in Dublin, California. But we all moved out there. I was the first to go out there to work, and when I was 25 for the San Francisco Examiner, and then my younger brother went to Stanford, and then my older brother was in my twin brother was in Chicago. He is older by 4 minutes.
So you're the baby there in
the
that
baby.
one.
So
Yeah.
if I saw
the
the
middle
twin
child.
right now, could I tell like, oh yeah, they're twins?
No.
Or is it no?
No.
Totally
Because my
different.
my twin daughters do not look alike.
Not at all.
But my wife is an identical twin. She's way better looking than her sister, but they look related.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
No. He's 6'5", I'm 6'3".
Yeah.
He's about
He's the big one.
260 pounds.
You're the little guy.
I'm the little
You're
guy.
the runt.
Damn
Runt to the litter. I always
yeah.
thought Chadiha was a big guy.
Well, when we were in high school, he was really skinny, and I was a more muscular, broad-shouldered guy. And then he, as taller guys do, he started putting on weight.
Filled out a little bit.
Yeah, and so
So what is? I don't never asked you this. What is Chadiha? What is where's that name from?
Uganda,
Uganda.
East Africa. My dad's from Uganda.
So was he born in Uganda?
Nope.
Born in America?
He was born in Uganda. He wasn't born here. He came here when he was a teenager to go to college at Washington State University, and he was going to actually. His dad, Uganda is very, where he grew up was very rural, and he was going to go back, get a degree in agriculture, and go back home. And then while he was here, Idi Amin took over the country.
Right, he's a bad man.
And so he could not go back home ever.
Were you a fan?
So he's never been back?
Been back twice.
Were you a fan of Kamala, the Ugandan giant, the wrestler?
Yeah, WWE.
Did you think that they did? Hey, there's some kind of. Could he be family? I mean,
well, it's
but he was actually a hog farmer from Arkansas, I believe, is what his real background was. But
it's crazy though. It's like back then you didn't hear a lot of African names. Now it's like you go to the NFL draft and you got Boye Mafe and David Ojabo and Odafe Owe. Like there's come out of the woodworks.
Well, that's the thing too, because I'm ignorant. Of
Ain't
stuff,
that the
right?
fucking truth?
Because someone's like parents are from Africa, but there's a difference between being from like Nigeria or Uganda or like Tamba Hali was from Liberia, right? So I mean, it's like
or Libya.
I think it was Liberia.
Feet, I know that.
Yeah. He was from Liberia. So there's you're right. There's a whole bunch of names like that. It's getting harder for people to understand and pronounce and all that stuff. I just never asked that before. So Uganda. So your dad has gone back now because Idi Amin is gonzo, right? So.
Yeah. Well, he couldn't really. Let's see. He went back. I take that back. He went back when I was really young, like I was 10 or 11 when Idi Amin was exiled, and then his father died when I was in college, like 1992, 93 era, and then he went back around the time my son was born, 2012.
And you've never gone.
I was going to go in 2012 when he went, but my son was being born. He literally went back in December 2012. My son was born in November 2012, but he didn't even know he had any family back there because there was no social media. There was no way to interact with people, and people started finding him through Facebook and contacting him, and he thought his whole family was dead because he couldn't.
What a life you come here as like a teenager and go to college, and you just you just couldn't even go back to your home.
And you're cut. Not only that, but you don't even know your family's alive.
Wild.
It's just completely cut off from his family.
How'd that affect him?
In weird ways. I think he was very private about. He didn't talk about his upbringing until I was like in my 30s. Like I finally asked him, like, "Hey, what's going on with who's who's your father? What was your life like?"
Do you have contact with any family now from Uganda?
I've had a couple people reach out and just had a little bit, but nothing like major. But yeah, but to answer your question, yeah, I think it's hard for him. I think when you're a teenager, imagine any of us at 19,
right? You're just not
losing contact with our family
and being halfway across the world,
country, at a time when there were still civil rights movements were going on, and you're trying to figure out. He didn't grow up with any of that stuff,
right?
So he's trying to figure out the whole world and have kids on top of that,
and try to make a life. Yeah. It's wild, man.
Yeah. You go to this Catholic high school now. Are you a star athlete? Like, what sports do you play in high school?
I played football, basketball, and baseball.
What was your best sport?
I thought it was basketball. It's kind of real quick story because when my brother and I were in 8th grade, the school we were going to had a really good basketball program, and we started to realize things were changing because we were playing basketball in the driveway one day with some friends of ours, and a car pulls up, and an old white guy gets out and starts talking to us, and he was the high school basketball coach. He's kind of like, kind of doing a little recruiting pitch.
That's right.
And then when we started looking around to go to schools, my dad took us to different schools around the area to see. And every time we went in, like the basketball coach would come out and want to talk, not just the teachers. It's like, okay, this is a little weird.
Hello, kids.
And so when we started going to high school at Gabe Richard, it was like everybody knew who we were. And it was clear that part of us going to school there was to play sports. And yeah, I grew up playing basketball because that's what we did. And I didn't play football until I was until my second year, and I only played it
in high school.
My sophomore year, and I only played it because the football coach asked me, "Hey, what are you doing in the fall?
Yeah, what do you got going on? We need people."
And he said, "Why don't you come out?"
How big were you in your sophomore year?
I was about 6'2", about 190 pounds.
So he gets you on the football field.
Yeah.
And so what happens? What position do you play?
I was a defensive back and a receiver. I didn't know what I was doing out there, but
did you like it?
I did like it. Well, they kind of figured, okay, this kid can play because they put me in to run down and cover a kickoff in the first game. And I ran down as fast as I could, and this kid just was coming up the field. And I just nailed him, like knocked him on his ass. And the coach was like, okay, we got
something here.
We like that. And so I was just sitting around, and during the as the season went on, I wasn't playing as much, and there was a buddy of mine who was also a point guard on the basketball team who was a year older than me. Quick aside, he actually ended up being the number 2 guy in the FBI for the last few years and covering all the Russia stuff. But and we would talk about, man, it's like, how long are we going to do this? Like, basketball season's coming up. Let's if this ain't working out by the end of the year, let's just get off of this.
You're in your mind, you're a basketball player that's just fucking around.
And what year? We're almost the same age. What year were you in high school then?
I was there. I would have been 86. Yeah, 85. Okay. I came to high school in 85. That was the 86 season, sophomore year.
So you're older than us for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah. Not you.
Yeah. No, you're older than me.
Am I older than you?
Yeah. I'm only 52.
Okay.
How old are you?
I'm 51.
You don't look 51.
You were in high school in 86? When did you graduate high school?
I was 17 when I graduated high school.
Oh, this guy's fucking smart too. See, that's
Same
the
here.
bad news.
Really,
I was 16 the first. I didn't turn 17 till November 30th of my senior year.
Yep.
Let's go.
I was a youngster.
So you graduated high school.
You fucking dummy.
Well, I was 18 years old. That's just what you fucking do.
That's right. What's that movie with Matt McConaughey down in Texas?
Dazed and Confused?
Dazed and Confused.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not like that. Listen,
He's just fucking hanging out.
I'm not like these guys getting out of high school and then going to a prep school. And I'm regular aged.
So
is
were
what
you
I
good?
am.
So you thought you were good at basketball, but did you think you were good enough? I'm playing basketball. I'm gonna go to college and fucking play basketball.
I was going to play college, play basketball. I was on the varsity team as a sophomore.
But you were not getting recruited by Michigan to play basketball.
No, but we'd have kids like I could play like I remember Terry Mills and Ramil Robinson were guys who played at Michigan back in the day.
Glenn Rice.
They were Prop 48 guys. They couldn't play. Remember Prop 48? You couldn't play.
They had to sit for a whole year.
For a year, so they would come down and practice with my coach, who was the ex-Michigan assistant, and we'd work out with them. I felt like I was athletic enough and coming into my own. And the problem was I was a little bit immature, and so when football took off, by the end of my sophomore year, I was starting. I was playing corner. I had an interception in our last game that I returned for a touchdown, like 60 yards.
Who'd you pick off? Who was this?
It was actually. I think it was Derek Alexander's school, Benedictine High School.
Bring it all back together.
Yeah,
he wasn't throwing a pass.
He wasn't playing by then because he's a couple years younger than me, but. I returned an interception for a touchdown. And then 2 months later, I had a letter from Indiana University in my mailbox with a media guide saying, "Hey, we've got your name from somebody, and we're interested in talking to you about coming to our school." And I was like, "Oh, this is
school." You thought basketball.
I was like,
"You're thinking basketball?
Yeah.
Let's fucking go, Bobby Knight." Come on.
Big old football helmet on. I was like, "All right, I guess I'm playing football. This sounds pretty good."
Yeah.
So when this is old school recruiting, you're a good guy to talk to. About this because there's no huddle, there's no rivals, there's no 247, and you just get a letter in the mail. You never gotten a phone call? No one had ever reached out. You just got a letter and it said, "Hey, this is Indiana. We like you."
Yep.
Now you're still just about to be a junior.
That was still a sophomore. I hadn't even gotten the second half of my sophomore year.
Who was that fucking coach?
Oh,
whoever
was
coached Trent Green.
I think it was. No, it was the. He had kids at Michigan at the time. God, what was his name? I'll remember it. It was.
I get on the internet.
God, what was his name?
So did the head coach reach out to you? Was it that?
It was one of those form letters you get, just saying like, "Hey, we've gotten your name. We know you're a pretty good football player. We want to get you on our mailing list and keep in touch." And it was enough to be like, "Hey, they know who I am.
Right?
They came and found me."
But that was the first football school to contact you.
Yeah.
Had any basketball schools or any small? So
no.
At that point,
the coaches are telling you you're not a basketball player.
Yeah,
that's what's happening.
But at that point, is that when you decide, okay, football?
Yeah, football.
That's all you needed to see.
Well, I was still kind of like.
Bill Mallory.
Excited. Bill Mallory, his kids. Mike Mallory was his son.
Did you know Sam Weich coached Indiana for 1 year?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that. Things you learn.
Yeah.
After Lee Corso was Sam Weich.
And so I ended up playing basketball, having a good time. I came back for my junior year, and I had a huge junior year. And that's when it really exploded all of a sudden, like
in football.
Now you're getting lots of letters.
Now it's like it's totally different.
Defense or offense? Like what were you?
I played everything.
But what were you? What was
Charles Woodson right here? He was going to do it all.
Yeah, I was a safety, a linebacker, like kind of like a rover. They called it back in the day, kind of a strong safety type.
Then who's recruiting you? Like some of the schools?
At that point, Stanford got serious. Colorado got serious. UCLA, Michigan State was very serious.
Big Blue never called?
Lloyd Carr, who became the head coach at Michigan, obviously,
he was the coordinator.
He was a defensive backs coach at Michigan then, and his son. He
Les
had
Miles
kids who
on
went
this
to
staff
school.
up there.
Yeah, well, his son went to school with me. All his kids went to school with me, and so it wasn't so much a formal recruitment. It was kind of like hey, like how are you doing, blah blah blah, and let's see what you become. And I realized even back then, like when you're in somebody's backyard, you had to really be a standout to get to Michigan. Like there were kids who were playing at bigger schools in the area who were not getting looks. So it wasn't like it was a knock on me. And Michigan State was, I got to know their staff pretty well. George Portis was the head coach at that time.
We'd run around with Andre Rison.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what ended up happening
White.
After my junior year.
Yeah.
All these schools started coming after me right before my senior year. I got a call from my head coach who was doing a football camp up there, and he said, hey, Perlis wants you to come up and talk. So I said, all right. I got in the car with my brothers and drove up there, and they had a big football camp going on. Walked into their indoor facility, and all these hundreds of kids out there, all getting ready to start football camp. He's in the middle of the field. They waved me over. He said, come over here, I want to talk to you. And so we sit there with my football coach and my brothers, and he's like, hey, just so you know, I've coached Carl Banks. I've coached Andre Rison. I've coached a bunch of guys from the NFL. I've coached in the NFL. I think you've got that kind of talent. I want you to be at Michigan State.
And this is Perlis?
This is Perlis. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
And so I'm like, all right. And he's like, and so whatever happens to you in your senior year, if you get hurt, miss a few games, you got a scholarship to come to Michigan State. I want you to know that right now. And I was like, that was the first coach to actually say that to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, well, cool.
You played it cool?
Was there
You
any
didn't jump up and down?
Was there any inclination to say I'm in, done?
Not at that point, because Stanford was a school I really had my eye on.
And like Colorado was close.
So you get
they weren't there yet, but Colorado was close.
Oh, Colorado was in the shit.
They were building. That was a hell of a program.
Yeah.
So you had some good schools, football schools, looking at you.
Yeah, and Bill McCartney was the coach there. He had Michigan ties. So
what did you like? Your folks, what were the family thinking when Stanford calls? I've never had a kid getting recruited by anything, but I would think, when Stanford says, hey, we'd like you to come, that's more than just football at that point.
Oh, yeah. They were high.
Wait a second. So like, oh, hold on now. Stanford says.
Yeah, no, they were high. My mom was big into academics. She grew up in Alabama, real poor, and academics was everything to her. So when Stanford was involved, they were definitely like, this is a place you should seriously be thinking about going to. So, I mean, it was definitely, that was a high point for me with recruiting with those guys, and they had me up for games in my senior year and gave me the whole.
Tell me about a recruiting trip. What happened on a recruiting trip? Give us a good story here.
Well, that's the.
This is hot, Mike. Let's go.
Well, that part of the story comes later. There's an in between, because I ended up getting hurt in my senior year. I ended up having
keep
injury.
his promise though.
Well, let me get the story. Pace yourself out. Exactly. Trying to jump ahead. Jumping ahead.
Yeah, let's go very slowly here.
Yeah, I got
now you must have had very good grades for Stanford to be looking at you, right?
I was a good student. Yeah.
And so, like, what were so you had a 3s, but what were you interested in academically?
I had no clue. All I was interested in what was happening with me with football, because I mean, when you're getting recruited at that level, like all these schools are calling you, they're all loving you up, and not like to the extent of like just sending you form letters. They're like calling, coaches are calling, girls on campus are calling you. Ooh. Like every night, you're getting letters all the time.
And this is with no cell phones. This is just fucking ringing the house phone.
Yeah. This is back in the day when you have boxes full of stuff coming your way. And so, yeah, it was great. I was living the life, and also you're getting like who was the guy? Tom Lemming.
He was the first.
He had the big recruiting letter,
guy.
and so he had me come out. He came out, called me up and said, "Hey, you're the number 7 player in the state before my senior year. Come out, and we're going to do a little photo and put all your bio together, ask you some questions, and put it into a newsletter."
Do you remember some of the other players that were in that top 10 in the state?
Oh yeah.
Your contemporaries were?
Yeah, there was a receiver who went to Michigan State and played for the Steelers. Courtney, what was his last name? Courtney Hawkins. Courtney Hawkins was the guy who was the big name at the time. I mean, guys you would know. There's a few guys who played at Michigan State. I'm trying to think of if anybody went pro out of that class. Well, Rodney Culver.
Okay, sure.
Was a guy who was in that class.
Notre Dame?
With the Notre Dame, played for the Chargers, died in a car crash. So it was a big deal.
That was like the beginning of kind of recruiting talk.
Yeah,
Tom Lemming.
Exactly. So Tom Lemming. So you're in a national newsletter, and you're like, oh man, all these names I've seen on other places. with this group.
But were you a Michigan fan? Were you holding out for Michigan? Was that important to you? Did you grow up a fan of any school? Did you care?
I liked Michigan, but I also wanted to leave home. Like, that was important for me.
Okay.
I wanted to get out of town and go someplace and see some things. So as much as I liked Michigan, it wasn't like I was dying to go there and see the same things and do the same stuff I had done before. But real quick, go back to what happened my senior year. I went to a football camp at Michigan, and I was doing a shuffling drill, and ended up tweaking my knee, and it was a partial tear of my ACL at the time.
You went a jabo.
Yeah.
At camp.
Yeah, it was at camp. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And you were at that.
I was at
workout.
that camp. Yeah, and so I ended up going into my senior year with a torn ACL, and I was
You didn't get it
partially
fixed?
torn. Didn't get it fixed because I was going to lose my senior year, and I didn't want to have that happen. So I ended up playing, and I ended up getting hurt again in my first game.
I wonder why that happened, trying to play with a torn ACL.
Yeah, it's not the best move in the world. I've heard guys. I don't know, Heinz Ward did it.
And didn't like John Elway not even have an ACL? There's some weird shit like that.
Yeah, but you're not getting hit.
Yeah, but
So you got hurt
he's also
first
a fucking
game, so
horse.
now you'd lost your senior year.
No, I ended up
You
playing.
kept
I played through.
Hobbled through it?
I hobbled through. Yeah, I missed like 2 or
Todd
3 games.
continues to try to tell your story and tell you what the fuck happened.
Yeah.
And so you get hurt again,
Yeah.
but then your performance is affected.
Yeah.
Right.
The tape was not what it was as a junior.
Are
And
you
so
losing offers now?
I'm losing offers. Yeah, so I'm losing offers. So these
The phone
schools
stops
that are-
ringing.
It didn't stop ringing, but a lot of schools started falling off, and really in some of those schools that were below that Power 5 level, who I didn't even talk to, like they felt like they had no chance. They're not even communicating with me. So yeah, I'm going through this. I finished my senior year football. I didn't have great numbers or great film. All these coaches that I'd been talking to and girls, they stopped calling, and it really was a huge blow when Indiana stopped, because they were the first to call. And when I actually called the coach who was recruiting me, I can't remember his name now. Like, they were like, "Oh, he's busy, can't get back to you," blah blah blah. And I remember sitting in my room and crying as a 16-year-old kid, then, because I hadn't turned 17. Because I was just like, "What happened here?" Like, a year ago, I was on top of the world. Even less than a year ago, I was in the summer getting all these recruiting offers and opportunities, and now I'm not even taking trips.
And your knee's still fucked up.
And my knee's still fucked up. And so Stanford came out, and they were going to do a trip with me. The coach came and watched me play basketball, and they were like, I think we're not going to do it now. Then McCartney came out.
You still haven't fixed this.
Still haven't fixed it. No, still haven't fixed it. And so,
is anyone telling you, hey, you should fix this? Or
yeah, well, back then it was like I kept playing it off. Like, no one was,
Right.
you didn't have a trainer going there and checking your knee and doing all this advanced rehab. Now it was just like you're trying to get through it.
McCartney comes out.
And they ended up not passing too. And then what happened was
He's a promise keeper.
Yeah, he's supposed
Didn't
to be.
keep it.
What the fuck?
Didn't keep it.
Yeah.
Right.
And so Michigan State's defensive coordinator, God, I wish I could remember his name, because he was
You're doing
good
really
guy.
well with the names today.
Yeah, it's so long ago now. But he ended up calling a friend of his at Wyoming, who was a DB coach, and he said, "Hey, we're not going to take this kid now. Like, I think he's a good kid. I think he's got talent, but he's been banged up, and trying to find him a home. And so, would you take a look at him?" And so this guy's name I remember is Greg Brown. A young guy, came out. He actually coached at Missouri,
Right, Greg
DBs
Brown.
for a while.
That's right.
And he came out, and he's like, "Hey, man," he was fast talking, young guy. He was like, "Come on out to Wyoming, check it out, see what you like, and blah blah blah. We want to have you here." And so I hopped on the plane.
This is Cheyenne.
This was like in January. It's Laramie.
Laramie.
I flew into Cheyenne.
Cheyenne. Go to Laramie.
And for them, they maybe are looking at a prospect that you would not have considered Wyoming.
Yeah.
But now, they're
Wouldn't be on
taking
the radar.
advantage of this, right?
Yeah, would have been on the radar. Yeah, so I ended up going out there, middle of a blizzard, flying in. They take me out
cold.
snowmobiling and eating cheeseburgers in the middle of the winter and on a mountain somewhere. And I'm like, you know what? These guys want me. I'm coming. Like, screw it. Like,
You're getting away from home.
getting away from
seeing the
home,
world.
and I'm going to show everybody who gave up on me that they made a bad decision. That was all my thinking was. I didn't know anything about Wyoming, about their program or anything else. I was like, you offer me a scholarship, I'm signing.
Right.
And so I ended up going out there. And right before I went out there, right before I went to my first training camp, I was playing basketball and my knee gave out again. And doctors were like, "Okay, you got to get this fixed. Like, you can't be playing football with a knee like this." And so I had to call them up and say, "Look, I can't come in my first training camp. I just blew my knee out." They were cool about it. They just said, "Come on out and get it fixed." And That's how my college career started.
So you were on scholarship though, so they honored that you're on scholarship,
Oh, yeah.
and you were just there working out.
Yeah, and I was
going
ready
to class.
Yeah.
So then did they go? You go through their doctors and everything?
They're doctors.
Okay,
They
good.
come out and do it. Yeah, they said, come out, fly out, we'll get you set up. And I'll never forget this because I remember after my surgery, I was sitting in the hospital bed watching TV, and they had this, there was some show on that was showing all these old football players, pro football players, what they looked like after they got done playing. It was like Earl Campbell,
Yeah.
Yeah,
like Larry Zonka.
Yes, I remember
Like
that.
Larry Zonka had to hang from a tree to like loosen up because his body was so beat up.
And it shows Earl Campbell on his ranch, like walking and all. I remember that. Yes.
And I was just like,
What am I
is
doing?
this going to be me? Like, it was the first time, like, and going back to it, like, I liked football because of what it did for me, but I didn't love it in that way. And I started thinking, man, is this going to be me? This was the first time actually football had become hard. It wasn't just like I'm just
It was
getting
more
all
than
the
just fun,
accolades,
right,
more
yeah,
than
yeah.
fun, going out and playing. It's like I have to actually work at this and get through this. So I went through my freshman year, rehab, got ready, came back for spring football, and in backpedaling drill. It was a simple backpedaling drill. I was just took a cut, and like they gave it a job, but my right knee gave out.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and so
That's
I'm like,
that's the Lord saying this ain't for you. Maybe. I don't
yeah.
know.
Well, at that point, yeah, and so that was like, oh my God, like what is happening to me here?
You're supposed to get hurt playing football, not
Yeah.
like going
Yeah,
through drills.
not random
So
stuff.
what was the reaction to that?
Everybody was. It was kind of like what Alberto Mondesi just went through. People were just like, God, this sucks. Like this, people like
This
me.
guy's
They
supposed to
love
be
my
good, and he
potential.
can't fucking stay healthy.
Right.
Yeah, and so you're like, what the fuck? And so I remember there was a guy, it's a couple older players. I came back to my dorm room and was really upset. And these guys, Ted Gilmore, he was a receiver. He actually ended up being a receivers coach. He's coached all over the place now. I think he's at Wisconsin. Or maybe he's at Michigan State now. Coached for the Raiders for a while. And this guy, Mitch Donahue, was an All-American defensive end. They came to my room and said, hey, man, like, why don't you come on out? I wasn't a big religious guy, but they said, you want to come to church with us, hang out, and see what's going on. And I always remembered that as being like a really pivotal moment in my time there of like, wow, these guys, I'm not just somebody who's here playing football.
They care about
I think
you.
that's the thing. You think when on the outside you feel like if you're not performing, you're not getting stuff
But these
done.
were players. These
Are players, and they
contemporaries, yeah.
understood like the real part of it, like you're a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And so they took me out. It made me feel good. But I knew going into my next year, it was like, okay, what am I going to do here? Am I going to get this fixed? Am I going to go through this process again? The rehab was totally different back then because they put you in a cast for 6 weeks,
Right.
and then you got your leg came out, looked like your
Shit,
arm.
now they got you up walking the day you have surgery.
Yeah, now it's like a 6-month process coming back. Jameson Williams can tear his ACL on a championship
get drafted
game,
in the first round.
Back then it was career ending.
Yeah.
It was like you didn't come back from it. And so to have
both.
two.
And rehab is lonely and shitty.
Oh, it was horrible. It was horrible. And so at that point I was just like, all right, well, I'm going to come back for my sophomore year and see how it goes. And they were still high on me. They were like, hey, if you want to move to linebacker, we'd love to have you play there and do this. But at that point I was just like, man, I don't know, man. This is like, do I really want to still be playing football? Like, I'm not going to play in the NFL now. Like, all the fun stuff's gone away and it's just work. And I just wasn't mature enough to handle that. And that's one thing I do a lot of mentoring now, and that's something that's a big reason for that is because of that experience. Like, my parents weren't big into sports. I was the only kid in my area to be a D1 athlete, so there wasn't anybody I could talk to about all this stuff and get advice. And so if I'd had that, I think I would have continued playing and pushed through. But I just was like, man, I need to just go to school and be a student. And that's kind of when I realized, probably in 1990, like summer, about February of 1990, I was like, I'm leaving football and I'm going to go to school.
Was Finis Dembo on campus by any chance? Was he the
He was there
basketball
the year before I got there.
Okay.
Did you know
That's what I
Finis
think of,
Denbo? That's
yeah.
my only Wyoming guy.
Right.
Finis, and
That's exactly right.
You know what's
Well,
funny about that? There's a guy named Eric Lechner who played like 12 years in the NBA, who played on the same team as Finis Dembo,
no
who
one
was a
cares
better
about
player.
him, yeah.
Nobody cares about him.
Had the name.
Finis Dembo.
Yeah, and Reggie Slater was a guy who was in school, basketball player there. At the same time, he played 10 years in the NBA, and he had a pretty famous son named Rashawn Slater. He's now a left tackle for the Chargers.
So when you tell them, okay, I'm done playing football, do you get to keep your scholarship and just be a student? Like, how does that work out?
Well, it was like there was only 2 months left in the school year, and so yeah, you basically they
And
pay
you already
your
been out
scholarship
there
at the
for
start
2
of the
years?
year.
So this is
into my second year.
in your second year?
Yeah.
Are you going to stay?
What are you studying at this point? Had you thought about your life at all?
Nah, I was
Just taking general studies.
Yeah, and I did. What was the question?
Were you going to stay? Did you plan? Were you going to graduate from there? Or did you?
No, I knew I was going to leave and go back I was going to either go to Michigan or go to Duke. For some reason, I had some love for Duke, but I said, it's going to be easier for me to go back home. I know Michigan.
What you want to go to Duke
in-state
for?
tuition. What's
Were you
that?
like a Duke basketball fan?
I think I was a Duke basketball time. Yeah, I was like, it'd be cool to go to Duke, but it's like I got off that real fast.
It's so weird. Like
it was a random thing, and so.
Well, think about in like 1989, 90, you didn't know anything except what you fucking saw on TV. What did you see on TV? Fucking Duke. Of course, everyone wanted to go to
Duke. It looked like
Duke.
a cool place to go.
Yeah, that's what it was.
I remember telling my dad, I was like, I think I'm going to stop playing football and just be a student. He was just like, well, just so you know, I've never wanted you to quit on anything. Like that's the big thing for me, like that you're giving up. And I'm like, well, it's not working out for me.
Just blew out both my knees.
Yeah, I blew out both my knees, and I'm going to work at it. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to have to work at this. And I told my mom the same thing. She's like, well, it's a tough time for you to come home because your dad and I are getting divorced.
Oh shit!
And so it's just like the home I thought I was going back to.
Not that.
Is not very stable now.
Did that totally blindside you?
Oh yeah.
You've
been away.
Yeah, I had no idea. I'd been gone for a couple of years. Fuck. It's like, all right, well, how bad could that be? And so I came home to like I thought I was going to have parents paying for school and all this good stuff, and it was like, no, you got to work.
Where was your twin brother? Was he in school?
He was at Michigan State.
So he was
playing baseball
close.
at Michigan State.
He was playing baseball at Michigan State.
Yeah, and actually he had just gotten cut from his baseball team, so he was like, hey, dude, it's
what
like,
am I going to do? Yeah.
But he was more so like, you don't realize how lucky you are to have a scholarship and have,
yeah, because baseball doesn't have full scholarships and all that shit. Yeah,
and so I was conflicted, but I was just like, you know what, I don't know what's going to happen. But I'm going to go out here and try to make the best
So
of
you
it.
came home, so you just had to go through all the transfer stuff to be a student at Michigan.
Yeah.
Did you go live in the dorms? Did you go live at home? We lived with mom and dad or busted up? They in different apartments? How did you live there?
Well, my dad was in a different apartment. My mom had moved to St. Louis. She took a job. She had just got her PhD. She was going to Washington University. So
you weren't going to live with her. That was a big commute.
Yeah, so I was thinking
Zoom class wasn't happening.
Yeah, and actually there were some schools. Eastern Michigan had recruited me, and I had talked to them. Their coach still knew I was around, and I had talked to Lloyd Carr about, hey, you think I should try to keep doing this? And because I was at Michigan, maybe I could walk on over there and do some stuff. But I was just like, you know what? I just want to get into like just being a student and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Did you think about going to St. Louis at all?
No, I was already gone. I was already in. I already applied to Michigan.
Okay, you were good.
In. Yeah, and so, but by the time I got to the point where I was in school and actually going to school, it was hard. It was hard to not have sports be your foundation or be your identity.
Yeah, you're just a guy at a big fucking school too.
Yeah.
I mean, Wyoming's a big enough school. It's not some little baby school, but it ain't Michigan.
No.
Even Michigan's bigger now, but even back then it was probably 40,000 students. 50,000
it was.
students
And you don't have a scholarship?
No
in Michigan?
scholarship, yeah.
So then how you paying for school?
I got a job. A friend of mine's dad worked at the University of Michigan Hospital in an office, so he got me an office job working with some...
Shining a fucking seat with your ass?
Yeah. I'd worked that for 20 hours and...
how can you be working at Scorekeepers or Rick's All-American?
Yeah.
See, I'm naming places.
Yeah, and actually there was a guy who used to play for Michigan. His name was Rick Rogers. He was there when Harbaugh was the quarterback, and he was we played on a flag football team together. And so he actually stayed with me because he needed a place. I rented a room out in the house. And it was good to have him around too because he knew what was the landscape of being an ex-athlete. But it was a transition because I went through a depression and a lot of like really tough I knew guys who were playing football on the team. I knew guys who were
You're like,
other
I
teams.
could do that. And
you feel like they're still playing and like I'm not. So the whole you feel
19 years old and retired.
But you went from like, I don't know if I like football. This is a lot of fucking work. I don't know if I do this. Then you didn't do it. Then you're thinking, man, I fucking miss football.
Yeah. I miss what football gave me.
Right. Okay.
Well, these are hard decisions to make when you're that young.
You're treated differently.
You treat it differently. Yeah.
Right? Is that right? That's what you missed.
That's why I always laugh. And I know I'm not against athletes getting paid. If you can get some money, that's great. But I always tell people, man, if you're an athlete, talk to somebody who's not an athlete and see what their lives are like. It's much better being an athlete in college.
Okay, so just a rewind here before we leave the college scene altogether. How many different places did you go on a visit to?
I took 2 visits. I went to Eastern Michigan. I went to Wyoming.
Did any wild shit happen on a visit?
Yeah, at Eastern Michigan, that was a crazy one. And I went to those 2 places because
What
basically
city
all these
is
schools.
Eastern Michigan in?
It's in Ypsilanti.
It's
like
right
next door.
there. Okay.
Yeah, it's right next door. And so I wound up going to both those places because all these schools that had been recruiting me literally stopped in like January. And so like most schools have already figured out who they've accepted for scholarships, and so it was hard to get visits at that point.
And you didn't go in. You hadn't taken earlier visits, so these were the first.
No, these were first visits. Yeah.
So what happened?
I'd been to the schools. So I actually, a guy took me out of DB. He took me to a couple of parties, and then we went to one party, and they were drinking schnapps. They were drinking a whole bunch of schnapps. And I was like, I wasn't a big schnapps drinker when I was in high school. I was beer,
schnapps.
and so I was drinking it like it was like soda, like it was Coca-Cola.
You're not supposed to do that.
And so all I remember is the room going dark, and then some lady said, "Get this motherfucking nasty dude out of here!" He threw it up all over the place. I couldn't see anything, but I kept hearing it. Like apparently,
you were having a freaking.
You had too much schnapps.
Those are chuggers. Those are shots, not
That's
chuggers.
right.
Oh my
That's right.
God.
So I couldn't hear it, but I couldn't see it, but I could hear it.
You ever have any schnapps after that? Did that
No,
ruin
that was
schnapps
the
for
last
you?
time. That was the last time. So what
God.
happened to me the next day? He said, "Bro, it was ugly. It was ugly. You blew up the whole
You
party."
probably don't want to come to school.
I like
here.
the fact that there was fucking.
You would be
there was
that guy.
schnapps. You know what? Do you remember what flavor it was? Was it peach?
I think it was pretty much sure it was peach.
There's so many flavors now.
Peppermint
But
schnapps.
my dad actually told me a
Goldschlager,
story about
cinnamon.
Wyoming recruiting trip. I never heard this. That the guy who brought me out there wasn't involved, but the defensive coordinator was talking to my dad when we were at dinner and had gone out with some of the players to hang out. And he asked my dad, he said, "Did you need anything from him to come out here?" And my dad was like, "What do you mean?"
Oh shit!
He's like,
hold on now.
you need some money. And he was just like, "Oh no!" It's like, "Hey, look, it's not like, hey, it's cool. Like we're totally cool with doing it. Like we do it for kids like this who we didn't expect to have come here, and we know that he's a talented player. We want him to feel good and feel wanted, so it's not a big deal." My dad was like, whatever. And so
He wasn't offended or anything.
he wasn't offended. He was more like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And so my dad went back to the hotel room while we were still out, and he was getting ready to go to bed. And he opened it up. He pulled his pillow back. He was like gonna pat his pillow before he went to sleep, and there was an envelope under the bed.
Oh yeah.
And so he gets it up, opens the envelope. He's like,
How much?
"There's $50 inside."
Where's that from?
Yeah, that was the payoff for me.
That's not even $100 handshake.
Yeah.
Put that in there.
I don't know, but that was like
You sure that wasn't from the
just a
maid?
little
or
taste.
something?
It was like $50.
Hey, $50 went a long way back then.
Just wanted
Yeah,
to
not
wet-
that far.
Just wanted to wet his beak.
Yeah, I was like, this is a lower level.
But like, if you would have known
Payoff.
about you didn't know about that. So if they would have said to you, "You need a little something to come out to Wyoming," would you have taken something or asked for something?
I wasn't at that point. I didn't have to. My parents.
I know,
were
but not-
profession- Yeah,
yeah, but you're
I wasn't even thinking about that. I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, yeah, if they had offered it up, would I have been like, "Oh, that'd be interesting"? Yeah, being a teenager, I'm sure I would have been tempted.
Because at 19, I would have taken anything anyone would have fucking offered me, and I was no athlete. No one's recruiting me, but
Oh, yeah, it would have been hard to pass it up.
That's what I mean.
Sure,
I just,
yeah.
you know.
Even $50.
So how did you find your way? You're a student in Michigan. When did you finally figure out what you wanted to fucking do with your life?
Well, basically, I bounced around a whole bunch of different majors.
Name them. Let's go.
Oh, I did. I tried to get into business school.
Well, your mom
I
got a
did
PhD
English.
in what?
Social work.
Okay, so did it have any interest in you?
No.
What did your dad do?
No. He was a dentist.
Did it have any interest
No.
in you? All right, so nothing there.
Why don't you want to be a dentist?
No, that's too much work.
They don't even work on fucking Fridays. It's the best.
I still have an athlete's mentality. I was looking for
It's something easy.
the
Right?
But like,
easiest
did your
road I
dad
could
bitch
follow.
about being a dentist when he come in? These fucking teeth.
No, he liked it, but he was
liked
big into science and math.
Okay.
I did
So
not like that stuff.
business didn't take. What's your next major?
Oh, I thought about doing I did English.
English?
for a second.
You gonna write
it
a
was
book?
too much.
I have an English degree. and
too
it's
many
very
old books.
useful.
Yeah.
But,
Too many
but
old
did,
books.
did your mom or your dad try to influence you at all to follow in their footsteps?
No.
Or so there was no,
No, they were big on actually just going to
your own
school
path.
and getting advanced degrees. They were like, if you get
Masters is better than that. Get a
So
PhD.
dad wasn't
Yeah,
coming home with
master's
some impressions or some teeth. Or
See,
something.
the way we did it
No.
at my house was I do this, and my wife was a teacher, and we did our best to make sure our kids didn't do that. So we forced them to do other things. That's
Yeah.
what we did.
Unbelievable.
So,
Yeah, it wasn't that way for us.
Yeah.
But no, so I ended up.
how'd you get to journalism?
Well, I was struggling academically.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan was a tough school, and I was literally my GPA Wyoming was like a 3.4, and Wyoming, I mean, in Michigan, it was like a 2.5 or something like that. Because I'd taken a couple classes.
It might have been really good on the football team, but not so good in regular.
So you call that struggling?
Steven, tell us some stories.
I would have fucking loved it. 2.5. I'd have been fucking thrilled.
Nah, it was rough. It was.
I'd have got $50 with an envelope.
And that's what your parents couldn't get online and check. That's when the grades would come in the mail.
Oh, shit.
And they would open up. What the fuck?
Yeah, you could try to change it with a marker.
But you're struggling and you're changing majors. So then what do you do?
So I ended up taking a journalism class, like an intro to news writing class.
Probably you're old in the class at that point. You're a junior or something, and then seniors, and they're younger kids, so you're getting in out late.
I was 21. I was 21. This was the last semester of my junior year, and so I was like, I need to get some A's. So I took this class and breezed through it because I could always write well when I was in school. I always did well in that, and so I was like, you know what, I'll definitely get an A in this class. So I took it, and then the teacher who was teaching the class, I wanted to try to get some scholarship money because I needed some cash. And so, hey, man, like I went to see this guy. His name was Don Kubit, and he was in charge of the scholarship program. And I said, I want to try to get a scholarship. And he's like, oh, okay, well, what's your story? I said, well, I'm in your news writing class, and I think I could probably get some money out of this. He's like, oh, yeah, I remember your stuff. And he said, I always remember this. And I always tell kids this. He said, you're pretty good at this. And it was the first time somebody had said that outside of sports, I could actually hear it. Because I had not heard that and had it resonate in a long time.
That meant something to you.
In school. So I was like, okay. And he was like, well, why don't you come back? And he took an interest in me, and we started talking some more, and he got me involved in a couple things they were doing with academic groups. And he basically became my mentor. And he said, look, if you want to do this, come back, take this class, and we'll see what happens. And he just started helping me figure out how to do this job. And even at that point, I wasn't like, oh, this is going to be my career now. It was just like, these are easy classes. I'm getting A's.
But did you like it?
I liked it. I was having fun doing it.
This is newspaper writing.
Yeah, newspaper. Yeah, exactly. And so I took a couple courses from him, took an independent study course when I was a senior, and then I actually had to go out and get a job. I was about to graduate. And so I went to him and said, look, I'd like to work in this field, but what can I do? Like, I didn't even know how the newspapers worked. I didn't know who worked for newspapers. And so he said, well, there's a couple career fairs coming here. Why don't you go down there and see if you can find a job writing for somebody or doing PR or whatever. And I go to this fair, and it's like, GM, Chrysler, Anderson Consulting, all these big companies are here trying to find PR-type jobs. And there's a little table over in the corner, the Ann Arbor News.
Yeah.
And I'm just like in a big, fat, old white guy sitting there, like with nobody talking to him. And so I got my suit on. I go up to him, and his name was Dave Bishop. And I said, hey, man, like, I just want you to know, I go to school here. I've been doing some writing. I haven't done anything with the school paper. I haven't done anything. I've written a couple.
Late.
Yeah, I did a couple articles for school. I've got like some schoolwork I can show you, but I've been an athlete. I'm from the area. I think I got some talent. And he said, well, hey, why don't you come back tomorrow and talk to our publisher and see what he thinks.
And what's the Ann Arbor News at this point? This is the Ann Arbor paper. It's a big enough paper, though. This is not some little...
It's college town.
It's a daily, right?
It's a daily paper.
It's a daily.
What year is
the
this?
Springfield
93.
Gazette. Right.
1993, yeah.
And so in relation to the Fab Four, where are we at here?
They were there. Well, that was there. I'm getting to that part of the story.
But this is like this. Yeah. Just to let people know, this is what's going on.
Fab Five was a big thing.
The Fab Five, yeah.
And so I come back, meet the publisher the next day, and he says,
Fab Four's the Beatles. Yeah, there you go.
Hey, I heard one of those guys is dead.
Right.
No.
Well,
What?
Ask Jake.
Other podcast.
So this is when the Fab Five is going on.
Yeah, Fab Five's going on, and the publisher talked to him the next day. He said, hey, look, I can't give you a job because you're not experienced enough. I can't give you the internship because we've already hired some people, but what I can have you do, once you come and work in the sports department, like do some part-time sports reporting, and let's see where it goes from there. And so I go.
So this is just like hourly.
Yeah,
or
hourly,
$20 for a story,
exactly.
Or copywriting, whatever.
Yeah, I forget what it was, but I go to
wasn't much.
I go to meet the sports editor. Corner room, big fat black dude sitting there. His name Jason Whitlock.
Come on, there we go.
His name Jason Whitlock.
He's the sports editor at the Ann Arbor.
He's the sports writer for the Michigan basketball team.
Okay.
I was going to meet the sports editor, and he was just in the corner typing, and we talked for a little bit. He's like, hey, man, just so you know, I've been in your shoes. I played football, blah, blah, blah. Like, whatever they give you, you should take it and see what happens, because that's how I got started.
So the first impression was good with Whitlock.
Yeah.
But he gave you some good advice there. Mm-hmm. And so when you talk to him, like, okay, here's a guy that can at least relate to me as being a former athlete.
Yeah.
It's making the transition.
Yeah.
So that,
How long did
we
it
like
take-
to have
it
fun.
was a
with
sign.
life, but that
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
maybe gave you a little bit of confidence.
How long till he said that he had hiked the ball to Jeff George? Did
that
it take
didn't
1
come up.
second? Not that first day? He didn't tell you that?
That didn't come up. He
Okay.
was. I remember looking at him and thinking, he's not the tallest guy in the world.
Right.
So immediately I'm thinking, well, what position did you play?
Right.
And he's a big guy, but he's like, I played at Ball State. I was an O-line. Okay. And so we talked for a little bit, and then I just started like doing stories, and we weren't super tight, but there was a group of guys who would go out and do stuff after.
So how big is the
after
sports department at the Ann Arbor News in 1993?
Oh, it's probably like 12 people.
So that's
Not even. Some of those people were part time.
it's amazing that there's that many people who are doing that now in today's world. I mean, that might be what the Kansas City Star has. You know what I
Totally.
mean?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many more jobs back then. They may not
totally.
all
Yeah.
what it was, but
Yeah, no, it was. You had a lot of people, and a lot of young people.
yeah.
But
College town.
Do you remember what your
know.
first salary was, or what how much you got paid your first job?
I can't remember what I was getting paid for the part-time job. But my first salary was $23,000.
At the Ann Arbor News when you
Denver
officially
News,
got
yeah.
full time?
Yeah, and what happened there was basically I took the job. I took that opportunity to do the reporting, and they said, "Well, hey, why don't we make you an intern and you can do half of the internship in sports and the other half in news." When I was doing the news side of it, I was so like clued into the community, and I knew all the stories I wanted to do. I was always pitching stories. I was always trying to break stories. I loved the freedom of it. And I loved the writing, and I just was able to impress them. And they said, "Hey, you know what? You're good enough at this. We'll give you a job." And so by the time I was in my July after I graduated, they were like, "We're going to give you a job to be a police reporter."
And you loved it.
I loved it. Yeah, I didn't know what a police reporter was, but I was like, "You're going to pay me to do this."
That's some fucking weird shit.
was
I did
thinking,
that.
right.
I did that out of school. I covered police blotter for a while for a small newspaper. You hear some good shit.
Yeah.
Go in there, have some good conversations.
You get deep into it. Yeah.
Or like when the guy sits down, you can write about this, but don't write about this.
Yeah.
Like, oh, really?
Yeah.
That's some good.
Yeah.
Let's go.
But to go back to Jason, like I think he was a big factor in me being able to get through that and find my way, because he definitely took an interest in me. We became friends and helped me see that you could go. He understood the transition I was trying to make, like going
Right.
from being somebody who had been known for being an athlete to somebody who was trying to make.
And he went from there to here? Did he go straight
did.
here?
He did, yeah.
So then how long did you stay in Ann Arbor at the News, and when did you get into sports?
Well, I became a pretty good police reporter, broke a bunch of stories, and I got big enough to where I was actually being offered jobs to go work at bigger markets. So I could have gone to Milwaukee, I could have gone to Dayton to
On the
work.
news side.
On the news side, but I wanted to be a sports reporter. And so Whitlock said, "Hey, man, just so you know, I'm trying to do some big stuff here too and get out of here." And so he said, "If you stick around, you could have my gig," which was a big deal. Like covering the Fab Five was a national, you got a lot of attention for covering that
Right.
basketball team.
What about the Fab Four? Did they get you
Football
covered?
team.
No, they
So-
They did.
but-
Yesterday's
but
We
news
became the
at
Fab
this
Four when
point-
Chris Webber left.
But
yeah.
he's getting a lot. I mean, was he popular? Was he had a lot of attention?
Oh
for
yeah,
coverage?
he
So-
was very controversial.
Okay.
Yeah, he was
Controversial? Really?
Yeah, a little bit.
So he was, but did he write a column or was it just a
He wrote both.
Okay.
That's the thing. He wrote a column, but he also was a reporter.
Okay, but
so
so
it's
he-
causing problems for himself because he would write all these hot opinions, and he had to go cover these guys the next day.
It's odd that he would cause problems for himself. but
Are we talking about the same guy? Are we talking about the same guy? I don't think we are.
but he's. I mean, you could see. So what he's doing, you want to do that.
I want to do that.
So you were
Yeah.
excited about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we actually got to a point where we both were really ambitious because Jason's like 5 years older than me, but we both were trying to make our names. And so there was a big professional conference. The National Association of Black Journalists they have a big conference every year in the summer. And so we're like, let's go down there and try to, spread our resumes around and see what's going on. And we were kind of debating whether we should do it or not. And then on a last minute lark, we just said, let's just go do it. And I had like a little Ford Escort car, which was a really small, almost like a
Don't tell
like
me
a Prius
y'all
level
rode in
car.
the same car.
Yeah. And so
No.
he said, we're going to go. He called me the night before, let's just go. And so we hopped in the car. It was in Atlanta, which is a 10-hour
Holy
drive.
shit.
And so we hopped in the car. And
You drove the whole time,
I drove
right?
the whole time.
Yeah,
he
he
was
ain't
in my
gotta
front
drive.
seat. And I always tell people, it was like people must have thought my airbag had gone on in the car. It was just this big black mass sitting next to me,
Snuggled up.
Big black man.
filling up the deal. And so we go down there. And We go. I'm talking to newspapers about news jobs. He's talking to sports editors about sports jobs. We come back and he's like, dude, I think I got a chance to. It was some other paper. I forget what. I think it was like Charlotte or someplace was into him. It wasn't the Star at first, and it didn't work out. And then the Star got him in like in October of '94. Mm-hmm. He said, I'm leaving. And he said, you can cover the basketball team now. And they moved me over to cover sports. They came here.
And you were fucking excited then.
Yeah.
Well, now the Fab 4 or 5 had gone. They weren't there anymore, were
no,
they?
they were still
there.
Yeah.
So then what was
that
like? You get to, I mean, that fuck.
It was a good learning experience for me. Like Jalen Rose and Juwan Howard had just left. So they had both left to go in the NBA draft that year.
Jimmy King
and Ray Jackson were left. Yeah, so it was kind of the dog years, the dog days of the Fab Five. It wasn't even Fab. It was more like just
these guys.
Yeah.
They're pretty good too.
Yeah, I think they barely
Robert
made
Traylor
the tournament
wasn't
that
there
year.
yet?
So it was
He
just
came the next year.
But out of the 5, it was just those two that were left.
Two.
Okay.
Yep. And then they got Robert Traylor and Maurice Taylor the next year, and a couple other guys.
Tractor trailer.
Albert White came in. He was put into up at Missouri at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did his uncle advise him to do
go
anything
pro?
when he was there?
There was some sketchy stuff going on with that group. But the bigger thing was the football. And ultimately what ended up happening was I did it for a couple of years. And again, going back to the days that we were in at that time, you actually had to print off all your clippings, put them in an envelope, and mail them out to whoever you wanted to have look at them.
They weren't finding it at AnnArborNews.net. No, they weren't there yet.
Yeah, and so I got a call in the summer of '96 from a sports editor named Glenn Schwartz in San Francisco, worked for the Examiner, and he said, "Hey, the Raiders just moved back here from L.A. to Oakland, and I'm looking for a beat writer. I saw your stuff a couple of years ago when you were sending it out, and I want to have you come in here and work for us. What do you think?"
So you'd never covered any NFL at that point. The Ann Arbor News, you probably just took AP stories about the Lions. I mean, they were a thing. No one went over there and covered the Lions. So the NFL, this is big time.
It was foreign.
Yeah. You're like, you'd never really done. You're talking about professional athletes.
Yep.
I mean, they were professional in Michigan, obviously, all the money that had been paid for those guys to come to school there. I'm joking. No, of course they got a lot of money to go to school there.
Fuck.
But, $50 in Wyoming. What do you think Chris Webber got? More than $50?
A little more than that.
Did you want to be around football, or did you not want to be around football?
Well, you know what? My editor at the time came to me and said, "Hey, just so you know, I'm pretty impressed by the fact that you're getting an opportunity to cover the NFL." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, usually young guys, they put them in baseball or put them in basketball because it's just they're easier sports to cover. Like if you're covering the NFL, like that's a big deal. Like that's like the premier sport, and you're going to go up against veteran guys, so they must."
But you knew football, so you had that going for you.
Oh, yeah.
And San Francisco is a huge market, multiple paper market at that time, right? So what were all the papers out there then?
Oh, it was the There were two in San Francisco, Examiner and the Chronicle. Examiner was the afternoon paper. You had the Oakland Tribune, you had the Contra Costa Times, San Jose Mercury News.
This is big shit down there.
And then you had a bunch of smaller papers. Yeah, it was at least 7, 8 papers.
Now, when you grow up in Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti or whatever, I mean, you're close enough to Detroit, right? I mean, it's like you can get over there if you wanted to go do something, but you're not part of it. And Detroit was a city that was kind of like fading, obviously, with all the issues there. You the San Francisco at that time, this is booming. Yeah. This is everything starting to go.
Hot.
So when you decide to go out there, was this like I pack up the freaking Ford Escort and drive it? What was the decision like, and what was the trip out there?
It's funny because there was a point in I worked in Ann Arbor for 3 years, and I was kind of like I was getting a little bit restless. Because I had kind of fallen into it. It wasn't like I was like.
How many people go from Ann Arbor to Detroit, though? Is that the natural move? You want to get to that big city?
That was a natural move. But for me, it was like, oh, maybe I should go to law school. Like my parents were always big on that. You could be a lawyer. You're a good writer. Blah blah blah.
You've only got one degree at this point. That's disappointing.
Exactly, yeah.
What did they think of this profession though that you were in?
They were kind of like, well, here's what my dad thought. I always remember.
You can't make any real money in this. This is bullshit,
well,
right?
I remember my dad when I graduated. He took me out to dinner. And so he sat me down. My dad's really practical, and he's like, all right, so you're graduating. I'm proud of you, blah, blah, blah. You made it through. I wasn't certain how this thing was going to go after football stopped. And I said, thanks. He's like, what do you want to do now? Like, what's your big plan? I said, you know what? I think I want to give this journalism thing a try. I've been, at that point, I was a part-time reporter, and it's like, maybe I can get an internship out of it. He's like, okay, all right. All right, what's your plan B? And I said, you know what? I really love movies. I think I might want to be an actor. And he was like, you know what? Let's just order some food here.
Right.
And stop. The more you talk, the worse this is getting.
Now, at this point, so what is your twin brother doing at this point? He had been at Michigan State. Had your twin brother graduated?
He was about to graduate.
He was about to graduate.
Yeah,
and what was he going to do?
He had like a basic degree. I think it was communication or whatever. He was going to get a job. It
So
wasn't anything
you guys had both disappointed your dad by not going on to graduate school or anything?
Well, I think he was hoping that would happen at some point, that we would come
You'll
around
grow
to
up,
the
and that's
idea,
why law school
for a
keeps
couple
popping
years.
up in here.
Yeah.
And
I had taken the LSAT. I was about to take the LSAT when San Francisco called. Like, I was taking classes, prep classes, and was going to go take it. And I went out to San Francisco, and they drove me around. And I saw how pretty it was and how cool it was. And I was trying to get more money. But I was just like, all right, here's the deal. I had a buddy of mine who I was living with who was a med school student.
This is back in Ann Arbor?
In Ann Arbor, yeah. Mm-hmm. He actually played basketball at Illinois, and he was doing a medical school at Michigan. And he was about to graduate. He was going to have a big party. Now, you know Steve Bardo? He does a lot of college basketball.
Sure.
Yeah, he's a big buddy. So Bardo was in town
Illinois
for this.
guy, right?
Yeah, he played with Kendall Gill and those guys.
I'm on the show every now and again. Stephen Bardo.
Yeah, there you go. And so I said, here's the deal. If I go to this party and I stay out late, I'm going to go to San Francisco because I'm not going to be able to do anything with this test. But if I'm responsible and I get home at a decent hour, I'm taking the test, journalism done, I'm going to go to law school.
So you hinge it all on one party?
All on this fucking, where's this party at?
Yeah, it's like we went to started out with some college bar. We wound up in Auburn Hills with some NBA guys. It was like, I got home at 5 o'clock in the morning.
You know how disappointed your dad would be if this is how you're making your decision?
You got any stories about Auburn Hills?
Yeah, I forgot that part too.
I don't remember this guy's name.
Yeah.
So you get on a plane.
That's how it happened.
You're choosing this job. So you go to San Francisco. This shit's expensive out there. This ain't Ann Arbor living. Mm-hmm. How'd you live out there when you on a Cub reporter salary at the very beginning?
Schnapps is expensive in San Francisco. You can't.
Yeah, can't get it by the case there. Actually, I got lucky. I lived in Oakland, which was less expensive than San Francisco.
And you wanted to be over there because that's where they are training and all this stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of made it work. I mean, it wasn't like when you're 25 years old, you don't need much. And so, but I do remember the big turning point for me when I was there, and when I really thought, okay, I'm good at this. There was a big story. Mike White. You guys know Mike White from the
Old Balls over there.
Old balls over there.
He was still young balls.
We're positive that Mike White, they were playing a tape of him on a phone call with us once.
Yeah. He was the head coach of the Raiders at the time, and he there was a lot of talk about him getting fired. And so there was a guy I knew who I'd met. My big thing when I first got there, I didn't know how to cover a pro team, so I would just go to the games early, and I would just try to talk up people and chat up people and try to figure out meet people.
Because you don't know anybody.
Know anybody. So I met this one guy he played football at Ohio State. He was in their personnel department. We'd have breakfast and talk about college football and all that stuff. And so I ended up calling him up like a couple weeks before the end of the season, and I said, "Hey man, I always talk about Mike White getting fired. Like, what do you think is going to happen?" His name was Bill, and he was just like, he's like, "I tell you what, I'm the only guy in the building that when Al gets every day Al has a Diet Coke and like a cheeseburger or something like that. Like I bring it to him, we sit and talk. And just the other day we were talking, and the old man says, you know what, Mike White's done." I said,
who is this guy that would do it?
His name was Bill Urbanek. He was a personnel guy.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, for the Raiders. And so I said, you sure about this? And he goes, yeah. I said, if I write that, am I going to look like a fool? He's like, nope. It came right from his mouth. And trust me, he didn't talk to anybody else. No one else knows it's coming but me. And so I go write it. I wrote it for our afternoon paper. And so there was a Monday night game. The Niners were playing some big game on Monday night. And so the paper came out, and people in the press box were telling me that there were people in the press box who were like, this is bullshit. Like, this kid doesn't know what he's talking about. The only person who knows what Al Davis is going to do is Al Davis. And it was hard to get news out of the Raiders.
How did you write it? Did you see?
I wrote it like they're going to fire. I said a team source says Mike White is getting fired.
And these other people.
So you go team source.
They want you to be fucking wrong because then they got fucking beats. They want
exactly.
They want to fucking
exactly.
Right.
And so I had hopped on a plane, and I was flying home for Christmas vacation, and when that story had come out, and so I got the next day, and my boss called me. He's like, "Guess what happened?" And I said, Mike White got fired. He said, yep, Mike White just got fired. And he's like, hey, great job. And so I called my guy, Bill, and I said, hey, Bill, man, thanks for doing that for me, man. It's like, I really appreciate it. And he's like, you know why I did that for you? And I said, no, why? He said, because you were the only guy who treated me like a person.
Right.
You saw me. Everybody else just walked past me, didn't think I was worth a shit. He said, you were the only guy who ever sat down and talked with me. And I never forgot that.
And he was a personnel guy. That you just warmed up to and talked to and struck up a friendship.
Well, that's what that's what the beat is all about. You got to know people and meet people and talk to them and all those things. On the journalistic side of that thing right here, so you have that source. It's a one source, but it's only one source, right? Not two sources. Yep. What was the editorial process like when you say this is going to happen? You told your boss, listen, this is fucking gold. Yeah. But then the old school stuff is like, wait a second, how are we going to verify this? What was that like?
Well, it wasn't like, for us, it wasn't 1-2 sources. It was just like, hey, do you trust the reporter? Because my boss had been a reporter, and they wanted to win. So when you're in I don't know if there was 2 papers in this town.
There was
back in the day, but
Times and the Star.
Okay, so when you have 2 papers, you're trying to do whatever you can to win, and we were the smaller papers, so you had to take chances,
right?
And so it's like if they knew me well enough to know that I wouldn't bullshit them, and if it blew up my face, then it would have been bad. But they just said, okay, let's run with it.
So you treated differently then, because everyone was like doubting you, this young reporter.
Oh yeah, it changed in a hurry.
You break this fucking story, then how did it change?
Yeah, it changed in a hurry. Because then all of a sudden, I got a whole bunch of more stories coming out of that, and it was just like, okay, this.
Well, now this is the guy who knows shit. People. Here's what I've found when we've done this for 20 some fucking years. People love to tell you shit. Mm-hmm. When they think you're someone who's going to tell everyone else. I mean, how many emails, phone calls, texts, weird stuff have you gotten over the years? Yeah. How many tips have you gotten for no reason? I mean, it's just, there's something about what we do, and I think it's changed over the years, but especially back then, fuck, man, like when you broke something in a paper, it's impossible anymore to break something in the paper. You have to fucking tweet it when you find out, right? But back then, people would just love to say, I'm the fucking guy who told him that. You know, to tell the prince.
And it lasted for a long time. If you broke a story, it lasted for 24 hours. And so if they 10, they were talking about it like all day long, giving you credit, and they wanted to talk to you, and it gets you. And so I also remember talking about Whitlock. I remember you mentioned Jeff George. When Jeff George was a quarterback for the Raiders and John Gruden came in, that same source, we were talking, he was just like, hey, man, I keep hearing this name around here that you should know about. And I said, who is it? He said, Rich Gannon. I said, Rich Gannon from Kansas City? He's like,
the guy that won't even play in the playoff games?
He said, Gruden loves Rich Gannon. I said, well, what about Jeff George? He's like, he hates Jeff George. And I said, really? And Jeff George had been like, whatever, put up some good numbers, and they brought him in, blah, 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 big contract. And so I was talking to Whitlock about this, and I said, man, I think your boy's in trouble. He's like, Jeff? I go, yeah. He's like, why? He said, because they're talking about Rich Gannon coming here. He's like, Rich Gannon? You kidding me? He's like,
Jason's here at that point.
Yeah, Jason's here. And he said, well, you might want to talk to Jeff about that. So he calls George up, and he's just like, hey, man, how are you with Gruden? He's like, oh, Gruden, my boy, man. I love Gruden. Gruden loves me, blah, blah, blah. He's like, that's not what I'm hearing.
Gruden's a snake, dude.
And we had these conversations like over the course of a week. Like I would call up, hey, you sure that they're bringing Rich Gannon in here? And they're thinking about signing him. He's on the premises. Like, well, Jeff keeps saying that Gruden loves him. Gruden loves him, blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as they signed Rich Gannon, George was like, what the fuck just happened?
I told you.
Is that Gruden is as cunning as they come.
Mm-hmm. He was young back then, too. But he was sneaky.
He was 34, 35.
So you're there. So you're the beat reporter for the Raiders from when until
I covered them for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden I had a lot of people trying to offer me jobs to come to bigger markets, bigger papers, and they let me cover like more of a national thing where I could do the 49ers too. And then
this was all still at the Examiner.
Yeah. And then I was there for 4 years, and then Mike Silver was always hanging around both teams because he's from the Bay Area, and he met me. He was like, "Hey man, I like your stuff. It's like, oh, you mind if I show it to my bosses?"
And who was he writing for at the time? SI.
SI. He's at SI.
So before you get too far away, who was the little guy for the Raiders? The older guy that was like Al Davis's right hand man.
Oh God, what's his name?
Al.
Yeah.
Al Locasal.
Al Locasal. Yeah, Al Locasal.
Did you used to have some stories about him, or just like you had to have seen some weird shit from Al Davis and that group?
Martin Davis.
I just didn't want to leave.
Al Locasal. He was the cheerleader guy.
Like,
he was the guy that always did the cheerleader tryouts, and he would always send out a press release saying, make sure that we're having cheerleader tryouts. Make sure you wear something that's scantily clad, not revealing. Like, it was like the most. You couldn't even write this stuff today. Who
did he send this out to?
Yeah.
He just said that.
He put it on the paper. Put it on the diaper.
But
you're basically wearing thongs and bras for the workout.
Because that seemed like he's eccentric, like Al Davis and Al Lucas out. That had to have been a weird fucking people to fucking cover.
Oh yeah.
And you probably heard from other NFL people. It's like unlike anywhere in the NFL, right? So it was a weird deal out there.
Oh, you would sit in I would watch the games in the press box.
And Amy Trask would fucking cheer and shit.
Yeah.
Maybe cheering.
Yeah,
in the press box
whenever it wasn't paid, you'd hear like the hand hitting the table. It's like, what the fuck is going on? It was just like, it was bizarre.
Did you deal with him at all?
A few times.
Like,
yeah.
What was that?
He was just an odd dude. I mean, he was. I always feel like. I always felt like I did well there because I was always the kind of person who would just talk straight to you.
Right.
I was never kind of like, let me just bullshit you or whatever. I would just talk straight. And the first time I got there, I remember he'd walk across around the practice fields at the end of the day in his white jumpsuit with his black patent leather shoes.
There we go.
I said, can I walk with you? He's like, yeah, sure, let's walk. And we just walk and talk. And
oh, my God. What was that like?
It was bizarre. It was like the end of The Godfather, the first Godfather, where the guy sitting when Brando's sitting in the tomato field with the sun. He was at that level.
Yeah,
and this was he lived for like 10, 15 more years after that. But it was just, I always respected his football knowledge. And he's kind of almost like a savant talking to him. But yeah, he was definitely a little bit crazy. I mean, he definitely was a different type of dude. I remember being in Seattle one time, and there was a guy, running back named Steve Smith, who played for the Seahawks, who played for the Raiders for a long time, and they'd had some kind of beef in the locker room, and Steve Smith wanted to fight the dude, and he was like, had to be held back. From fighting the old man. I remember talking to Al afterwards. I said, "What'd you think of that?" He's like, that dude wanted to try me. I can't believe he wanted to try me because he would have got his ass kicked.
Just look at Marcus Allen, the relationship they had, and he ends up in Kansas City.
Yep.
And so then how do you leave the Bay Area?
Well, Silver had seen my stuff, and he said, "Hey, I want to talk to you. I want have my bosses check you out. Do you mind if I send your stuff over to him?" I said, "Sure." And I didn't think anything of it at the time. Sports Illustrated was like going to Michigan as a college football player. It was just like that was the end all be all. And I actually went to Puerto Rico with some friends after the season was over in 2000, and we were like on a remote part of this island where it was only like you had to walk down the street to a telephone booth that had like chickens running around it to make a phone call. And so because I was checking my cell phone, I was like, oh, I got a phone call from this guy from Sports Illustrated and wanted to talk to me. So I called the guy back, and his name was Rob Flater. And I said, hey, I got your call. What's up? And he's like, hey, Jeff, I'm glad you called me back. We want to have you come in here and talk about a job here. And I was like, okay, well, just so you know, I'm not trying to be a reporter. Like that was the entry level job was a reporter, fact checker. I'm not trying to be a reporter. He's like, no, I want you to come in here and be a writer. I'm like, what? And he was like, yeah. I was like, can you come in here anytime? I'm in Puerto Rico right now in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, it's like, how about, and I was going to go to Europe too. And I said, how about I come in here in a month or so? I'm kind of tied up. He's like, yeah, sure. And so I go in there, go fly to New York City, walk in the office, and even still, I'm like, is this really happening?
Yeah, what's going on?
Like, are they interviewing me? Like, who's competing for this job? And they're like,
how old are you?
I was 29.
So this is an accelerated path you're on.
Yeah, so I'd gone from from being 22, not knowing what I was going to do at this career conference to 7 years later.
You still thinking about being an actor here?
No.
Have you given
but SI is the pinnacle right now.
This was the pinnacle,
shit.
And so I was like, I'll. And they were like, you want the job? And I said, yeah. Like, what are you going to pay me? And it was like $90,000 or something like that. I was like, can I get a little bit more? And they're like, no, that's all we're paying you. I was like, okay, I'll take it. And from that point on, it was just like, all right. And
so did you have to relocate? Did you have to go?
No, they said you could stay where you're at. You don't have to move.
So where were you? So
I was still in San Francisco Bay Area. Yeah.
And so then what do they tell you you're going to cover?
Yeah, what are you writing?
NFL. I was covering the NFL.
So then you just, how did that work then? Like you said, I want to go to this game. I want to go here on a Wednesday, and you just go.
Yeah, it literally was that way. Literally, you would basically, it was so weird.
Or they tell you?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
But it was so weird because the first story they gave me was on Brian Urlacher, who was coming out of school. He's at New Mexico playing football, and they said, why don't you go down here and do a story on him? And they sent me down there in it was before the draft, so it had to be like April, whatever. and the story was going to run in like May.
Right, yeah. That's a
like
different
late May
kind of writing.
After the mini
Right.
camp. And I was just like, I got like 2 months to do this? I was like, yeah. And so I flew down to New Mexico and hung out with him and his buddies for a couple of days and went over to where he was from in New Mexico, his hometown. I did all this stuff. And then I remember going back to the room to write because I went to a mini camp in Chicago when he first showed up there. And I was like, oh my God, I spent all this time reporting this stuff. Like, what am I going to say? Like it's like having like 5 pounds of notes that you have to cull down into like 1,500 words.
And
You've never done this kind of reporting before.
And no immediate deadline. You got time to work with and everything.
Yeah, and so I'm just like sitting there like, what am I going to write? And I got used to it after a while, but it was so bizarre because you'd write like 10 stories a year and you wouldn't do anything else. You would likely have months on end where, and it was great. I still say it was the greatest job I've ever had because I could say, I want to go spend a week in Miami, seeing if there's a story here on Dan Marino, and you could go stay at the swankiest hotel in South Beach. You could go,
for all of it.
Yeah, you could have the nicest dinners, and the writers would tell you that. They would say, if you travel anywhere, you spend as much money as you can, and
Probably cut their own
be like,
nose off
go.
to spite their face at that point because we probably should have been smarter about those things, and maybe they wouldn't have cut all those jobs.
It was so much money, man. It was crazy.
You were there how long?
I was there for 7 years.
Okay, give me the best story that you're most proud of, or the one that you had the most fun doing, and the worst one that you fucking hated or you didn't like doing, or just your worst experience.
Let me see. God,
7 years, that's a lot of good shit.
A lot of
there.
stories.
It's only like 6 stories the way they work these guys.
Well, I think my favorite's always going to be Tom Brady's first Super Bowl. When it was my second year working for the team. It was his first year as a starter, and he got knocked out. That was also 9/11 year, so it was a crazy year anyway. I had moved to New York City by then, so I'd moved to New York City to kind of be closer to the office and see how things worked.
And that was New Orleans.
That was in New Orleans.
And you don't remember this, and I do remember you. That's the first time I met you because I was down there with Whitlock.
Yeah, I remember you hopping out the car with Whitlock.
Yeah.
His whole entourage.
As my friend Jeff Chadiha, and do you remember who's in that car?
Jeff George was in there
Jeff
too.
George, his wife, me, and Whitlock get out of the car.
Then we were going to some party like Hard Rock Cafe or someplace like that.
This is probably we're going to Jamal Anderson's Super Bowl party.
Dirty Bird party.
But there was another party that someone was having at the same time that everyone had fucking gone to. So we go up there. It's me. And did you go up there with us?
I went to. I remember being in the Hard Rock Cafe.
It was me, and then Whitlock, Jeff George's wife, Tom Arnold, and
Tom Arnold. I remember that.
Clearly 2 prostitutes with no question, right? And you remember Ludacris was the DJ.
Yeah.
And they had this massive spread of food,
but nobody there.
Nobody was fucking
empty.
there.
It was empty. Yeah.
And we're looking around, and some other player, a higher profile player, was having a party somewhere else, and we were all there. And so, do you remember what happened? So we were there, and Whitlock. So what you didn't know was Whitlock was battling a very bad case of the gout.
I think I heard
this motherfucker wore a suit. And so there's some. I imagine I've been lucky enough. I haven't had the gout. I imagine there's some things you don't do when you have the gout. One of them, wear some new hard ass shoes with no socks. And this motherfucker, no. My Troy McSwain had this suit made for me, So he's wearing these shoes, and this motherfucker is in agony, right? And then pretty soon, and then it's getting ready to storm, right? And so we're in there. And I remember like the windows were somehow whatever, but you hear, yo, hey, yo, look out the window, and Whitlock's gotta go, gotta go. He just left me. Getting the fucking cab, and he leaves me. I got to go. And later on, I find out I go back to the fucking hotel room. There's fucking blood involved. These guys fucking, it was a fucking nightmare. So anyway, he leaves me there with
Jeff George
and his wife, and then there's a fucking storm coming down, and then we had to take a cab. Very nice.
Oh yeah,
Jeff George is a very nice guy.
Super nice dude.
But that's the first time I fucking met you.
I remember you had a big old car on Canal Street. You guys all hopped out.
So how many cover stories did you get? Did you ever get a cover story, or is
I did a bunch. Yeah, I did a bunch.
So what was it like the first time you got a cover story?
Well, I was going to take that was the I'll finish the Tom Brady story that we're talking about. This wasn't. I did a story on Tom Brady earlier in the year, but at the end of once you got to the Super Bowl time, Mike Silver would write the lead story, and we'd all help him. Like myself, Peter King, Josh Elliott, who later became a host on Good Morning America.
Yeah.
We'd all go out and report. And so I had to go follow Tom Brady because I knew him and did the story on him. And so I went to Tom in the locker room after the game was over and said, hey, man, we're going to do a big story on you, and I need to follow you out of here. Which at the time, again, thinking back to it now, there's no way security would allow this to happen. He's like, all right, well, come on with me.
And how did you know him from before?
I did a story on him when he started blowing up for the Patriots.
Okay, so you
earlier in the year.
But you'd also told him
right.
you're a Michigan man,
Yeah,
probably.
yeah,
So you had a little connection.
And you love it. Right?
Yeah, we had a good connection. We're still friends now.
And he's from the Bay Area, and you'd been at the Bay Area.
Yep.
You guys are like you're like brothers.
Oh, we had a lot of connections.
This is your fucking guy. And
he's my
you're
guy.
Gonna follow him out. So what
and
happens?
so he takes me on the bus.
You get on the fucking team bus. No
roll
fucking
out.
chance having a
Get on the team bus. We go back to the hotel. We're walking through the lobby. All the Patriots fans are there going nuts. It's me and Tom and Willie McGinnis and Lori Malloy. And they're probably just thinking I'm just one of Tom's buddies or whatever. So we're all walking together. We get on the elevator and somebody tries to get on with us. And Willie's like, nope, just players. Just players coming here. I'm just laughing about this. We go up to the hotel. Tom's girlfriend shows up. And then his buddy shows up. Agent comes in, and they're just sitting there watching the game, hanging out. Like, Tom's going crazy. Patriots won their first championship ever.
He's a kid.
And at one point he's just like, Bill just called. I got to go see. I got to talk to him. And he went up there, and he just found out he was supposed to go to Disneyland because he was the MVP of the game. And so he said to Bill, I said, hey, Bill, you mind if I go to Disneyland? After this, he's like, instead of going back to the team, he's like, dude, you just won the championship, Super Bowl. You can do whatever the fuck you want to do. So he comes back, and he's sitting there on the bed with his girlfriend and his buddy. I'm looking at this girl. I'm like, this chick's probably got about 8 weeks. Tops.
It's about over.
This guy is 25 years old. He's a good-looking dude.
There's an expiration date on this.
If she's still here in fucking March, I'll be shocked. And obviously, he married Giselle, a bunch of chicks. But it was just that's always my favorite story because it was just that's what you could do with that side back in those days. You had that kind of.
He was so.
What a great
I remember how
story.
innocent like it was for him. He would just was really like a kid. I remember the next year. I think the next year, remember at the Super Bowl, because that's the year they didn't make the playoffs, right? That was Raiders and Tampa. And I remember I went over to like the media center at one point, and it was a Super Bowl MVP. It was like a Cadillac or something. And they had last year's Super Bowl MVP come be at the press conference. And I think he said that was the first car he ever had in his life that he owned was the one he got for fucking winning the Super Bowl. And I was like, I can't believe that the same person now was that guy.
Yeah,
and to be able to be like have a front, row seat for that had been really fun as a reporter.
Oh yeah,
and the shit that just doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. You don't have that kind of access. People aren't as trusting. Again, back in SI in those days, you could go anywhere and you showed up. They were going to give you whoever you wanted for however long you wanted them, and it was just understood. It was an honor to have SI want to do a story on you.
You get a fucking you get a leather bound copy of the fucking like the yearbook and a T-shirt if you get a fucking subscription.
That's right.
Right? Hey, New England fans, it's the moment you've been waiting for.
So what was the shitty story?
Yeah,
though?
what was the worst experience you had?
Oh,
someone fuck you over on something?
Some fucking asshole or something fucked up or they lied to you.
I'm trying to think if there was a bad story there.
A bad subject.
I remember when Jake Plummer had gotten to the Broncos. We were going to do a cover story on him. That was a big deal that he was like, he had it was the Broncos were always, forget this now. They were always trying to find a quarterback after John Elway. Remember that? They went through a ton of different guys.
Yeah. We watched that.
When they got Jake Plummer, it was supposed to be the big thing.
Yeah.
Jake Plummer
Jake the
was
Snake.
And so they said, hey, we want you to go down there and talk to Jake Plummer. We're going to do a big cover story. And I said, okay, great. Call the Broncos. They, great PR staff. Come on in. We'd love to do it, blah, blah, blah. And so I go in there, I got all my questions ready. I'm ready to like really go at it and have a good conversation. Sit down with Jay Plummer. He walks in to the meeting room. I got 10 minutes. And I'm like,
who says that? Him?
Jay Plummer, yeah. I got 10 minutes for you. I'm like, you kidding me? I said, we're doing a cover story, man. He's like, I know, that's how I got
This is Sports Illustrated.
Sports Illustrated. This ain't like the Denver Post.
Yeah. And then what?
The Platte County Tattler.
Yeah. And so I'm like, and so I had to like scramble and come up whatever the 10 most important questions I wanted to ask him. I had to throw at him, and then I said, "Hey, man," and which is you learn this as a writer or reporter over time. It's like if you can't get it from the source, find other people who can get it for you. And so I said, "Hey, man, you mind?" He was getting engaged. I said, "You mind if I call your wife up, your fiance, and talk to her?" He's like, "Yeah, sure, go ahead and give a call." she gave me like a 4-hour interview, like gave me all kinds of good stuff. And the whole story was really about what she gave me.
Right.
But I always remember that walking in there, it's like, this dude, man,
Come
it's
on,
just
man.
like
You're Jake Plummer.
10 minutes to do a cover story. Like, and that was tough because you came back with that. And like, they were like, there was pressure because when you were at SI in those days, all the best writers in the country were there. And so you were competing to have like whatever you put in print, it better be fucking amazing because it was going to pale in comparison to everybody else's if it wasn't up to snuff.
Fucking Jake Plummer. And so then why do you leave Sports Illustrated?
I got to a point, I think when I was working in New York, Jim Rome had started a TV show and his producer, Michael Mann, who's become a friend of mine, would have me come out and do some stuff from time to time.
Rome is Burning.
Rome is Burning.
Show, yeah.
Yeah, and they were kind of fighting that. They didn't like the idea of having writers going and doing TV stuff. And then I would start doing some stuff. ESPN was its First Take now, but it used to be Cold Pizza.
Yeah, but you were an aspiring actor. So
I kind of felt that. Yeah, I felt that urge, and so ended up going over to. I would do stuff for them. It was Cold Pizza. They would actually have different writers come on, and there were a lot of people who came through that. They'd call it like cover two. They'd have two reporters together, and they would give him news and notes. So, Chris Broussard did it. Ken, what's his name? Ken Rosenthal would do it. Pat Forty would do it. There are a lot of people who did it. Steve Weiss, a lot of people who did it, and it was a huge boost to their careers.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that helped a lot of those writers back in that time was the fact that they started putting TV shows on, and you got to fucking fill time.
Yep.
Let's find some people. And if you find a writer who knows shit, who actually will talk, because sometimes you get writers on and they write, they don't talk, right? So you get that little double deal, and it helps really get your brand out there.
And you're still at SI when you're doing this?
I'm still at SI when I'm doing it. But I ended up having a conversation with one of the producers of the show, a guy named Mike McQuaid, about like, hey, you know what? Like, what's over at ESPN? What's it like over there? Blah, blah, blah. And he's like, if you want to come, I'll like help facilitate that. And I remember we had a big, it was always a big issue at SI about writing online. They'd started their website, si.com, and they were like, there was a lot of writers who didn't want to write for it. Like, it was like beneath them.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so I was like, this is the future, guys. Like, we got to embrace this.
Radio was beneath a lot of writers. A lot of shit, a lot of things were beneath them.
They didn't want to do it. And I said, this is the future. I remember having a conference call, and there was this big uproar. Writers were like, we shouldn't be doing this, blah, blah, blah.
The old school guys.
And the editors
Who were some of the writers?
I remember Grant Wall was one of them.
He was a young guy.
He was a young guy, and it didn't make sense. And so ultimately, I was just like, I think we're kind of getting left behind here. I think this is a place that's going to like, and so I said, and so McQuaid set up an audition with the people back in Bristol, and they had me up, and I was like, I'm out, man. They gave me a good contract, and I left. At the time, people thought I was nuts to do it because they were like, why would you leave SI to go work at ESPN.com or do stuff? ESPN was still like,
so
it was still okay, but it wasn't like SI.
They hired you to do what?
Write in.
They hired me to write
on air.
And do that show, Cold Pizza, to do debate with Skip Bayless on First Take. Yeah, and so there was like they had like a revolving door of like myself and Jamel Hill and Howard Bryant and Patrick McEnroe. All these different people would come on and do because Woody Page had left. He had left the show, so they were.
So what was this like with fucking Skip Bayless? I need you to be honest.
Yeah, I always liked Skip, and I'd met Skip at other places because Chicago Tribune had tried to hire me when I was still in San Francisco, and I talked to him then about he was the columnist at that place at the time, and Skip was cool. It was just a process because you had to fly to Bristol, which is a painful place to go to.
You're living in New York.
I was living in Kansas City. I moved to Kansas City by that point.
Okay.
Why did you move to Kansas City?
Oh, that's a long story. I was my girlfriend and fiance at the time was from Joplin and went to school at Missouri, so I moved here. Girl, yeah, exactly. That's a short version.
You moved here
of
for
it.
love.
But was Whitlock was here?
Whitlock was here.
Did you move here for Whitlock? Just be fucking honest.
We were kind of chasing each other around the country for a while there.
But it makes it like Kansas City's in the middle of everything. You can everywhere, and so you go out and Skip Bayless. What wasn't always what he is now. It was a process what he turned into, which is wildly successful. But he appears to be.
Does he believe what he says?
Yeah, he does. I think he'll make himself believe it. He'll make himself believe it. At the time, but to me, it was he gave me again one of those people in my life that gave me some really good advice at an important pivotal time. Because when that show moved to Bristol from New York City, they lost a lot of people who wanted to stay on the show, and And it was kind of a weird thing. You had to fly into Bristol on a Sunday night, get up at like 6 o'clock in the morning, come in, do production meetings.
They put you in the little hotel there. They sent drivers and shit though, didn't they? It was like they were good at it.
Is this still the same show? Is this still?
Yeah, it's still First Take.
Okay, so first take.
But back then there was a debate part of it. It was First and 10.
Right.
And
Okay.
so that would be within the show. It was more of a variety. It was like Get Up with a debate show put in the middle of it.
So were you enjoying this more than Sports Illustrated, or are you thinking, fuck?
It wasn't. I loved Sports Illustrated when it was in its heyday, and then they just started hemorrhaging money and bad deals.
Because you spent a week in Miami at the fucking fanciest restaurant.
And dragging their
that was
feet,
part of the problem.
Going, advancing into the future.
Internet. And so you'd go in there and you'd spend a week. You'd get up, do this, get done, and there'd be nothing to do after you got done at like noon. You'd go around, sit in your hotel room watching TV. And so,
was there wild shit going on in the Bristol campus?
I don't remember any of that because I would just come and go. But working there was like working for General Motors.
Yeah,
it's
a factory.
It was like a factory, like where Sports Illustrated was like a boutique. You walked in and you just had. But anyway, at one point they started going to a different kind of debater with Skip. They wanted to have a more bombastic personality, and so they brought Stephen A. back. They brought in the two live stews, and I was just like, I remember going to Skip. I said, Skip, that's not really my personality. I'm fine with giving opinions, and I think I have strong opinions, and I have good thoughts on stuff. I think I'm a thoughtful person, but like, do you think I should be more like these guys in order to last on this show? And I was talking about doing E60, and they weren't crazy about me doing that show anyway because it was a difference of a different audience.
That was a good show.
And he was just like, Jeff, let me tell you this, like, the one thing I've learned in this business is that if you try to be fake, try to be who you aren't, it's going to show up 10 times worse to people who are watching at home. It's like you're never going to be able to fake it out there. And so, and be honest with you, like I like what you do when you're with me. My girlfriend, who's now his wife, likes what you do. You bring out a different aspect in the conversation, but I would never tell you
to come out here and just not be yourself.
Who you are.
Yeah.
And it was the best advice I ever got. And it was like I ended up moving towards E60 and then never looking back. And the show went in a different direction, but he was just like, it was a very, very sincere, like, this, don't ever change who you are.
What was the intro in E60? What were you on your phone? You're walking or something? What was it?
That's right.
I used to love that fucking, what were you doing?
That show's gone now.
Those promo shots.
Jeff Chadiha.
Yeah. It's still around, but I think COVID hurt it a lot.
Yeah.
COVID killed because you couldn't really go out and spend time with people.
Yeah. I like those stories. I like D60, but those stories, I like Real Sports on HBO, long stories. Those things are just better for me. Maybe it doesn't sell. I guess what sells is yelling at each other on TV in the morning. I guess that's how it fucking works. It is. You just pay people to yell. You don't have to go anywhere.
So then how do you, after ESPN?
Yeah. I came here, NFL Network.
So how did that happen?
Kind of a similar situation happened with ESPN. Like, I didn't realize this at the time, but a couple of things. One, when I got to ESPN, the second year I was there, the recession hit, the housing crisis hit. So
2009-ish.
2009. So my contract was for 3 years, and it was like, okay, like I was in a really bad place in terms of leverage and negotiation, and like barely was able to. I took a huge pay cut to stay there, and they've been bringing me back for a 4-year deal. But when in between that time, I was looking for other places to go work. And the NFL Network was starting to hire reporters to come on the air, and I went and talked to them in L.A. when I went out to do Jim Rome's show for a minute and met Eric Weinberger and some other people out there who were running the network. And they actually wanted to hire me, and I ended up going back to ESPN because they gave me a 4-year deal. But when that deal was coming up, Weinberger called again in 2015 and was just like, hey, like, we're not losing out again on him. Like, we're going to get him, and we're going to make a big play to my agent. And so they made a big play. I mean, it was like they offered a 4-year deal, and it was worth twice as much money as I was getting from ESPN.
And you could do what you want?
You could do what I want, stay where I was at, could write, do TV. And I was like, so I go back to ESPN, and I'm like, hey, look, they just gave me this big offer. Like, what are you guys going to do? And they're like, well, we can do a 1-year deal with a 1-year option and like a $10,000 increase in salary. I'm like, maybe you didn't hear me right. They're giving me twice as much on the years, and they're giving me twice as much money.
And it's not Bristol.
I can go to L.A. to go to the office. And they're like, that's what we can do for you. Like, the best we can do is those 2 years. And I'm like, well, I guess I wore up my welcome here.
Yeah, thank you.
And so
if they'd have matched it, would you say at ESPN?
I probably would have thought about it. Yeah, I probably would have thought about it because there were things I was doing, especially with these 60 that I was really happy about.
Right.
The show was coming into its own. And I'll never forget this. The day after I signed my deal was in July of 2015. The very next day, big story. ESPN has to cut $200 million from their budget this year and $300 million next year. I'm like, now I know what just happened.
Boy. Yeah.
Yep. And I was just like, this is like, thank God for like looking down on me, because it was just, timing was good again, and I ended up leaving. But it's, you know, that trend has played out throughout my career of like, you see, you know, you go back to 20 years ago where the way the world was, and you see how much has changed based on technology, based on trends.
Let me ask you a question
different.
about journalism. Because you came from an old school newspaper. I mean, you are not working for anybody. You're working for the newspaper, getting stories and doing all that stuff. And then when you go work for ESPN, they're partners with a lot of leagues and things like that. Now you're working for a thing that's owned by a league. How much has that changed? I mean, journalism has changed so much over the last 20 years or so. But how does that change what you do?
You know, I'd be lying if I said if NFL Network had approached me back in 2003 when I was at Sports Illustrated, there's no way I would have worked for a league. It was just there's no way you would be in that space. But again, the way the world has changed in media, and I saw a lot of ESPN with those partnerships. Like, yeah, you still do the same job. It's just that the people above you have a whole different situations they have to work out amongst themselves. I remember back when I first got to ESPN, they used to joke that David Stern had a second offense up in Bristol because he was up there that much.
Always watching.
Always watching, determining who was going on the pregame shows, how the coverage was going to go, what they were saying. I remember when Pat Forty was there, he was very critical of John Calipari back at Kentucky and what was going on there. And there were rumors that people would actually change stories that he wrote based on Pitino's complaining because, again, partnerships were in place with the SEC. And yeah, it's – I think the job I do now, you certainly know there's things you can't touch, you can't get into, but the audience is so different now. The audience is way more informed, and the way you approach it, like I don't feel like I ever pull punches when I give opinions about people. I think I'm still the same person when I report and do stuff. It's just that I don't get to go out and, you know, I'm not going to go do some expose on Clark Hunt's private life. Right. You know, that's not going to be in the cards, but there's still plenty of things you can do that people will read and care about. The
world's just changed. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, you can fight it and go stand on a street corner, or you can
teams cover themselves.
I mean, it's what they do. Teams have their own
players
stuff.
break news on Twitter, so it's just a different deal.
It's like, you know, they used to, honestly, it's weird. They used to needed the paper, right? They need the newspaper. They don't need that stuff anymore. So now it's all just kind of packaging content. Is what it is. And I guess it's just a little sad in a way. I miss the old days of some of that shit, but what the fuck are you going to do?
But I still say two things will never change. I teach a journalism class at UMKC. I tell kids this all the time. Two things will never change in this world. One is the demand for information, and one is the need for stories. And stories go back to the Bible. That's how we evolve as a culture. But information, the desire to be first, to tell people what they haven't heard, it's just about how you package it. The packaging and the platforms have changed, but it's still the same stuff. Yeah. So that's how I look at it.
So what do you teach at UMKC?
A class called sports writing. You know, I try to.
Are you an adjunct professor?
More of a lecturer. Yeah, you have to be a whole.
You didn't get another degree though. You've still disappointed your dad.
Disappointed.
Yeah. When you think back to that first professor that told you, you know, you're pretty good at this. Do you keep that in your mind now? In a way where you're able to maybe make an impact with a young kid as someone that has a chance to mentor young journalism students?
Oh, yeah, totally. When you recognize, how it can change lives, and I've had a lot of, I think with the first class I had a ton of great students, and I stay in touch with quite a few of them. They call for help with getting jobs or stuff they're doing with school. I just did an interview with a young woman who's in an interviewing class, and so I try to impart that. I try to let them know that.
You told you had 10 minutes? That's all you had?
Yeah. That's right. But yeah, I try to let them know that it's still a fun job. It's not as fun as it used to be, but still I think it's a good profession. And really they can actually affect it in ways that people our age can't, because it's a reactionary business in nature. Things happen, we talk about it, we write about it, but ultimately the future of it is going to be technology based. So there's not a lot of Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg's running around, but the more you have, the more you can have a Bleacher Report type situation or a Barstool Sports type situation, or what Bill Simmons has created. There's opportunities there in media to create a different form of it that they are way more tapped into.
They're going to be at the leading edge of it.
Exactly.
Instead of holding on.
And what are all the different things you do now with NFL.com and NFL Network?
I write for NFL.com. I do reporting for NFL Network. I do a lot of their mornings, a lot of their daily shows like NFL Now and Total Access.
When you're on TV at home, you just have the suit top on, shorts
suit top.
on.
Yeah.
When you come
just
on,
suit top.
just suit top.
I'm not sitting there
Always
just
looks
buck
good. He's got
naked
the
below
shelves
that.
behind
Yeah, it says I'm dressed. I don't want anybody panning down, but yeah.
It's a weird fucking question.
Yeah,
I know what it's like there. He's got the little stuff on the shelves,
Now
right?
you know
He's got his
when he
shelves up
watches
there.
you on TV what he's fucking thinking. I wonder.
Hey, listen, I worked in TV for a long time. I watched a lot of guys go out there with suits
How
on and
much-
shorts in the summer.
How much do you have to travel? Because, like you said, you have a son,
yeah.
so that's a consideration.
Yeah, well, it's not as much. Now we're getting out of COVID, so it's starting to change a little more. But obviously, the last couple of years, we're doing a whole bunch of traveling at all.
Well, it helps to have the fucking best quarterback in the country right here in the backyard. You do a lot of
That-
Chiefs
a lot of
games
stories here.
and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
do a lot of Chief stuff now, and it's crazy to think back when I was started at SI. Like literally, you would get on a plane. One reason I moved from California to New York was I would get on a plane on Tuesday night to be at a facility on Wednesday, and I would stay until Monday morning, and I would go home and do it all over again. I'd be gone for like 5 days in a row. Now it's like if I'm gone for a couple days, it's a big deal. Yeah, you're right. I do a lot of Chiefs games because of Mahomes and the star appeal here.
And hanging out with the good food in the press box. We sit there. We have the
Yeah.
hot dogs and chicken tenders. It's the best.
Yeah, but you learn things evolve, and it's COVID was really rough for a lot of reasons, but it kind of helped me out on the TV side of it because I did a lot more stuff on the TV side because they couldn't fly other reporters in to do this stuff. I was happy just doing the writing part of it and just doing some TV every now and then, but I've done a lot more TV because they're like, oh man, it's like you're here, you can do this stuff, you can be out there reporting, and again, one thing I tell kids too is be willing to grow. Don't just decide you're a writer or you're a radio person or a TV person. Do it all because it's going to make it fun for you, but it's going to give you more job security as you
Be
go
a
through
lifetime learner.
I remember one of the coolest things you ever told me. It's been a few years ago. I can't remember. I was talking about going to some concert. And
Was it about gout?
No, it was not about. That was not cool. You said, what's it like to be able to fit in, go to to be around and like go to a rap concert, and you could just fit into that environment or whatever, right? And I kind of took after my dad with that, and I always appreciate that. That meant a lot to me because I felt like that's one of the gifts that I have. I could fit in any situation with any kind of people or whatever. But I was reminded of that. It was a fucking funny story that I never told you, and I laughed my ass off.
Right.
This has been a couple of years ago. This old guy comes up to me at a fucking remote, right? And some people just say all kinds of shit to me. And you stir some shit up in Kansas City. When you come on the show, there is a reaction, and that's what you want, though. You want people to fucking care, right?
Yeah,
you know that, right? This fucking
This guy hates the Chiefs.
That's
This guy
well,
comes,
we help.
No, but this guy
put that out there,
This
too.
guy comes up. No, he doesn't though. His son loves
Yeah.
the Chiefs. He covers the Chiefs fairly.
How do you talk to this
That's what
fucking
he-
Jeff Chadiha?
Right. And so this guy comes up to me, he's real serious. And you can tell when someone's coming up, someone's got something to say. And usually it's a beef. Like they don't like what I said or whatever.
Yeah.
He comes up to me. And a lot of times I'll get, man, you're not what I expect. Now that I see you, you're not what I expect. I'm always, what the fuck do you expect? I mean, here I am.
Yeah.
He goes, and then no one can spell your name. And few people can say it right. You know that Jeff Chadiha you got on the show? and I'm trying not to fucking laugh. Yes, sir. He goes, I saw him on TV the other day. He's a black man. and that's what I'm thinking, right? Because I'm thinking, and I go,
Here we go.
And I go,
No shit.
he is? And he goes, yeah. I said, oh, shit. And I go, well, fuck that. And then he walks off.
That was it.
But then you see him like, like trying to reconcile what I said.
Yeah.
Like,
He's like, what?
but it was just this guy was he went there just to let me in case I didn't know.
Yeah.
Because it's so funny because people hear us on the show. I've had people tell me they thought I was black, they thought I was Mexican, they thought all kinds of shit.
You're not what I expected.
But I'm never what they expect.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was so funny. He showed up. This Jeff Chadiha. He's a black man.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like it is. You get used to like certainly in this job, people recognize you because you be on ESPN or whatever SI back in the day. They see you more than you think, and so that is part of like. Especially as a writer by nature, it's hard to get used to that sometimes. I was in Dick's Sporting Goods yesterday buying some shoes, looking for shoes, and I was walking out, and the guy said, "Hey, thanks for coming." He's like, "Hey, thanks for coming, Jeff."
Yeah.
And I was just like,
right.
Yeah. And he kind of waved to me, but I always, one thing about living in Kansas City, I've always appreciated. I love the passion for sports here, and
people
I love
are cool.
And people are cool, man. As much as you get tagged with that because people think you don't like the Chiefs because you're honest about your opinions. Like I've had so many people who come up to me like at my gym, at a restaurant or wherever, and they're just like super nice and super cool and just like, hey man, I like what you do, I appreciate it.
Because you're right a lot.
And even if they didn't say that, I'd be like, hey, thanks for listening, thanks for coming up and talking to me and being civil and being cool about it. So it's just like I never. It's one of the cool things about living in this town is you actually can connect with people. Like when I was in New York or in Bay Area, it was so big, you didn't have that.
Deal,
and so here you can actually talk to people and see them every day, and I never take that for granted.
Well, I'm glad you live here. We love this town. This is where Steve and I are from.
Yeah.
And this is home for you now, right? It feels like home.
Yeah,
Right? You've been here long enough.
Anywhere
There's
else.
something special about Kansas City.
And tell people, because you're involved with a lot of different things in the community, Operation Breakthrough and different things like that. You have a lot of ties in the community that go beyond what you do on the radio and TV.
Oh, yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, I've been involved with Operation Breakthrough. I was a board member and a volunteer there for a long time. I'm not on their board anymore, but I'm going to, they have a big Kentucky Derby Party fundraiser this weekend. I'm going to be down there for that. Involved with Dayton Moore's Foundation, See You in the Major Leagues. We started a mentoring program called C10, Mentoring and Leadership, that started off with 10 kids like 4 years ago and 10 mentors, and now it's twice as many. And that's grown, so that's been a phenomenal thing to do. I'm a part of the KU advisory board that I've just joined that for the last year or so, which has been cool. It's getting back into
UMKC.
KU Healthcare, KU Health Center, UMKC, teaching over there.
Jeff.
And so, it's a lot of fun stuff is going on. But again, one thing about living here is that you get to be a part of those things. It's harder to touch lives if you're just in a bigger place with a lot more competition.
Okay, so your son's 11. Mm-hmm. What's his best sport?
I think, I'm biased because he's like me. His most natural sport is football. So he played flag football last summer, and he's had a chance to really enjoy it. And he's just very natural. He's fast. He's big. He's catching passes. But he plays basketball, baseball, and soccer as well.
Now, you saw both sides of football, what it can do for you and how it's a rough-ass fucking sport.
Yeah.
Do you want him to play football? If he says, Dad, I want to play in high school, maybe become a college football player, will you steer him towards that, or will you steer him away from that?
It's right now he'd like to play more football, and I always tell people, because I played so late, like I'm not really at any point like concerned about him missing out. Like I think I can teach him the stuff he needs to know, and I'd rather have him play when he's more advanced,
That's
his body's
right.
more mature. So I think he'll play at some point when he gets to high school, because he's going to be a big kid. He's already 5'1", 5'2", and got size 9 shoes. So he's a big. He plays, but he's physical.
It's pretty much Nate's size.
He's almost Nate's size.
Come on.
Yeah, but he's physical. He likes, the other day he wanted to, I got some boxing gloves from going to Title Fitness. He wanted to put them on and go out, and he was throwing some hooks and jabs and taking some shots. He likes the physical part of it. But I think he's like me too. He loves basketball. He'll play basketball all day long, and I love that because he's not sitting around wanting to play Fortnite forever or sit on YouTube. Like, you give him the option of, here's a hoop and a basketball, and here's an Xbox. He wants to play.
Well, this has been awesome for people to get to know you, and man, you've had a hell of a career. It's not done yet. You got lots to do, and
I hope not.
You're doing well, but I mean, you sitting down and talking about all that stuff. Do you think, like, man, back to when you were 19, 20 years old. You didn't know what the fuck you were going to do. Now you are wildly successful in this profession.
It is crazy, man. And I'll tell you a quick story, tie it all back up to Wyoming and football. Like a few years ago, when the Patriots played the Falcons, it was in Houston, Super Bowl. And some friends of mine called me up and said, hey, man, I want you to, or a buddy, a guy who's on the football team said, hey, we got some people down here who'd love to see you. Why don't we grab a drink when you're in town? And I said, sure. And it was on Facebook. And it was funny because, like, a lot of the kids who were there when I was in school, which happens in a lot of different programs, is like you get some kids who come from different backgrounds and they get in trouble. They don't go to class. They, break the law, do stuff. And so there are a lot of guys who were there who were not, I was like, what's going to happen to them when they're out of this place?
Right.
And so I said, okay, let's do that. I said, I got down there and they said, who's coming? He said, oh, we got this guy and that guy, blah, blah, blah. And so coming to this spot over on whatever, south side of town. So I go over there to the spot. It's like a little bar with a big patio area. And I get there and it's like 20 guys are there. And I was like, wow. And then like 10 more guys show up out of nowhere, and like we're just talking, and one of the guys like, hey man, when you were in school, like we were sorry you left. We thought you were going to be great, and I'm glad that you had it right back then. You were studying and getting good grades, and these guys who were in trouble a lot now, like one guy was an engineer, one guy was running his own chiropractic business, one guy was a policeman. They were all like, good dudes. They were taking care of their kids. A lot of these guys didn't have dads when they grew up. Reggie Slater was there. He came by. And it's just like, it dawned on me. It's like, they didn't look at me as a failure. I think for all that time I thought, man, I quit.
Right. Cause
I couldn't cut it. Like my body gave out on me. I embarrassed myself. Like we were all connected by that experience, which is what I think it's like. And again, going back, I don't want to get on a big platform about where college sports is at, or that's what makes it special, is that they respect the talent. They respect the experience and teammates. And some of these guys were older than me. Some of these guys were seniors when I was there, and they came and they stood up and they were proud of me, and
awesome.
that to me was like, that was one of the most gratifying experiences of my career, is knowing that these guys really watched me now and kept up my career, and they're proud of what I'd done too. It wasn't just about what you did 30 years ago. And so that to me has always been something I look back and think, as my life's progressed and you do all this stuff and you go in different jobs and different places, it's like, it's still about touching people and about touching lives and letting people touch your life. So that's what I always take away from it.
You want to cuss one more time before we go?
I'll say fuck one more
That's
time.
There
right.
you go.
Hey, and I tell you, and we sure love having you as part of the A10 family.
Yeah.
And just even talking like now, I didn't realize how long it's been. It's like meeting you at that Super Bowl and everything else.
That's 20 years.
Now, if you do, I don't know if you do, but do you? If you happen to have a picture of Whitlock stuffed in that car driving to Atlanta, if you could send that over, we can make that part of the podcast. I'm gonna be thinking about that shit the rest of the fucking day. They thought the big black mask. They thought the fucking airbag.
Yeah.
That's some funny shit.
Yeah.
Oh, Jeff, thanks so much for spending
man.
time with us, man. We appreciate it.
No, I thank you guys. But KU Health Advancement Board, I know I said it wrong. It's not advisory board, advancement board. But we do great stuff. But thanks for having me on, man. It's been great.
It is Jeff Chadiha from NFL Network and NFL.com. Until next week, the microphone is off.